Good morning. I am delighted to welcome everyone to Salisbury University today. This is the first board meeting of the 25-26 academic year. Each year, we welcome and celebrate the beginning of a new academic year as a fresh season of learning, discovery, and opportunity in higher education in Maryland. Typically, at this first meeting, we recognize the recipients of the Board of Regents Staff Awards. We are transitioning to a spring recognition event and will honor this phenomenal group of outstanding staff in April. In the meantime, please join me in giving this group the best of our best a hearty congratulations for their exemplary contribution. I'm also pleased to say our new regents are with us today. Dana Stebbins is president and CEO of the Cornelius Group. She also serves as chair of the Maryland Economic Development Commission, and she's joining us today via Zoom. Sherry Nadine Blount is a renowned intellectual property attorney. She has previously served as vice president at PBS, and she's a former student of Regent Leggett. Sherry, raise your hand so everyone knows who you are. Michelle Speaks is co-chair of the Warnock Foundation, a nonprofit organization committed to the city of Baltimore and its people. Michelle, raise your hand. And Ray Rivera Forbes is a Prince George's County student at Towson University who has just completed her freshman year. And I know she's here. She's just probably stepped out for a moment. So let's give her a round of applause. And I'd like to welcome all of the new regents to their first official board meeting. Today, we also welcome 3 new chairs of the advisory councils. First, we have Ray Prouty, who is the Council of University System Staff Chair. Mr. Prouty is staff at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. You want to stand up so people can see you? Next, we have Ryan King White, Associate Professor at Towson University, who is the Council of University System Faculty Chair. And finally, we have Jefferson Vasquez Reyes, who is the chair of the University System of Maryland Student Council and is a student at the University of Maryland College Park. Jefferson. Each of you is an important bridge between your respective representative groups and the board, ensuring that faculty, staff, and students' voices are part of the consideration as policies, priorities, and decisions are shaped. We look forward to working with you this year. Continuing this with celebrations, this next one is bittersweet. Last week, Chancellor Perman announced that Vice Chancellor for Accountability, Dave Mosca, plans to retire. Dave, on behalf of the board, congratulations on your well-deserved retirement. We thank you for your integrity and work to make the system stronger and to facilitate public trust in our operations. Mr. Mosca will continue to serve through the end of March, so each of you will have a little time to share your gratitude. Let's give Dave a round of applause. Finally, we are in Salisbury to commemorate Salisbury University's centennial celebration. From its beginnings as a teacher's college in 1925 to its recent Carnegie designation as a research college university, Salisbury has spent a century transforming lives through education, innovation, and community, and has been an anchor to the Eastern Shore. The centennial celebrates not only where the university has been, but where it's going. empowering the next century of leaders and change makers. Here's to the next 100 years. President LaPree will give a formal welcome in a moment. And I just personally want to thank her for a wonderful evening last night. And I have to thank President Bro as well, because she did a very wonderful instructional program at our table on how to crack crabs. And she preserved my nails by letting me eat off her tray. So thank you, President LaPree, for a wonderful evening, and thank you, President Bro, for a wonderful Crab Fest. Before we move to the agenda, I want to acknowledge some of our recent challenges higher ed is navigating. Last week, a high-profile murder took place on a campus and at an event attended by students. The next day, many HBCUs across the country received what has been described as terroristic threats, causing several to cancel classes and have students shelter in place. These events strike at the core of our commitment to providing a safe environment for students to learn. Please know that all of our universities are approaching safety and security with all seriousness. They are reviewing protocols, coordinating with local authorities, and taking many more actions to keep our students safe. In addition to the security challenges, higher ed is also navigating unprecedented budget cuts, and the USM is not immune. We appreciate the sacrifices that everyone is making during these difficult times. Across the system, we are tightening belts. That includes the board. In this effort, the board will forego its annual participation in the Association of Governing Boards Conference this year, and will also move the February board meeting to Zoom as a cost-cutting measure. So we're doing our part. And as I close, I'd like to express deep condolences on the passing of Dr. Eric Richardson, an alumnus of the college that would become UMES and the former president of Morgan State University. Dr. Richardson is an icon in Maryland and to the HBCU community. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family and friends. And now to our agenda. I will turn it over to President LaPree, who will provide a welcome to the campus.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, Regents, fellow presidents, and all the guests here today. Welcome to Salisbury University. It is an honor, as always, to welcome you to our campus as we celebrate a truly historic moment in our history. As you just mentioned, on September 7th, 1925, exactly 100 years ago this month, the Salisbury State Normal School opened its doors for the very first time. One building, Holloway Hall, where we had our event last night, a handful of faculty and staff, and a bold mission to prepare teachers for Maryland's Eastern Shore. At the break, I won't go on for my remarks in the interest of time, but at the break, if you are interested, our NAB Center, which is right across the way, has an entire exhibit up that goes through the history of Salisbury University through the decades, and you can see how we've come so far since 1925. So I hope you'll take a moment to walk through there. But in the century since we were founded, our mission has grown and expanded in ways our founders could scarcely have imagined. We've evolved into a nationally recognized comprehensive university. We've launched cutting-edge research. We've added thriving programs in business, the sciences, the arts, and healthcare. We've built a vibrant campus that welcomes students from across the state, the country, and really the globe. We've become part of the University of Maryland system, which has provided invaluable support, resources, and collaboration, helping us advance our mission and deepen our impact across the Eastern Shore and beyond. But for all of those accomplishments, our greatest achievement has always been and will always be our students and their success. Their success is the measure of our work, and we all take that very seriously here. And we know that we cannot provide them with the leading kind of education that they deserve without the strength and support of the community that surrounds us. The Eastern Shore has stood apart from the rest of Maryland in its history, its culture, its landscape, its people. The Eastern Shore is unique. And that uniqueness puts Salisbury University in a special role as a hub of connection, opportunity, and progress. From cultural and performing arts to our original mission of preparing teachers. In fact, the statistic I would share with you this morning, today, more than 40% of Wicomico County Public School faculty and staff are Salisbury University graduates. Our university is not just located in our community, we are our community. We are of this community and we believe in this community. And while many across this region do this work, we are certainly a cornerstone that helps to support and sustain it. That connection is perhaps most visible when it comes to one of the greatest challenges and opportunities that we face together today, and that is rural health care. On the Eastern Shore, nearly 1 in 5 residents is over the age of 65, and rural populations often experience higher rates of chronic illness, fewer healthcare providers, and greater barriers to access. And addressing those needs is central to our work, and our close ties with Tidal Health, one of our healthcare systems, ensure that together we are preparing the healthcare professionals and public health leaders that our region depends on. Because of our location, everything we do here matters. Everything has real impact on families, on schools, on businesses, and on the health and well-being of our neighbors. And that is why, for the majority of what I would like to take my time for today, I am especially proud to welcome some members of the Salisbury University community to speak to you all, because their work really exemplifies that impact and that impact we are having in the community. Dr. Linda Hauser, professor and director of the School of Social Work, will speak to you in just a moment. She will be followed by one of her students, Caitlin Cecil, a candidate for the Master of Social Work, and then Leah Wynn, a public health major, and then finally, Dr. Deneen Long-White, associate professor of public health. I know you're going to enjoy what they're going to share with you about the impact that their work, their research is having in our community. So please join me in welcoming to the podium Dr. Linda Hauser to start us off. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President LaPree, for the opportunity to share a little bit with all of you about our School of Social Work and College of Health and Human Services initiatives in rural communities. At any given moment, the School of Social Work has well over 700 graduate and undergraduate social work students, 350 of whom are serving in practicum placements primarily in Maryland's rural communities. They are embedded in primary care pediatric practices, hospitals and health centers like Tidal Health, which President LaPree just mentioned, and VA medical centers. Given that skills in moving fluidly between those micro, meso, and macro settings are foundational to the social work profession, we are continually looking for new partners and new settings where we can come together with colleagues in other disciplines to positively impact health and well-being. We are particularly interested in ways that these partnerships can fill resource and service gaps in areas that might otherwise remain underserved. To Salisbury University and the College of Health and Human Services, preparing students for the contemporary workplace, as you all know very well, means equipping them with skills for interprofessional work. In rural communities, the ability to collaborate across professional boundaries, to leverage relationships and resources and opportunities is made all the more important by geographic and structural barriers. Simply put, needs too often outstrip resources. Making a positive difference requires creativity and a willingness to move beyond professional silos. So at SU, we're trying a lot of new things. For example, over the past few years, the School of Nursing invited first our respiratory therapy students and faculty, and then just 3 years ago, the School of Social Work faculty and students into an end-of-life practice simulation at the Henson Medical Simulation Center. We are also extremely fortunate in our proximity to the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Since 2012, the Eastern Shore Collaborative for Interprofessional Education, which is co-chaired by Dr. Kim Van Volpen from SU School of Social Work and Dr. Lana Scher from UMES. This organization, this group, has facilitated interprofessional and interinstitutional collaborations. Through yet another SU-UMES partnership, faculty and students in social work, nursing, physician assistant, and pharmacy programs are coming together to engage in a multi-week interprofessional wellness course. And that happened this past spring, and there are continuing conversations about the future of this work. As another exciting example, since 1994, SU and UMES have collaborated to offer a dual degree in sociology from UMES and social work from SU. And again, these are the students who are going to be change makers and difference makers in the world to come. I am delighted, proud, thrilled that you get to hear today from one of our graduate students, Caitlin Cecil. She took on an entirely new, even somewhat experimental internship this past year, and doing that in the context of something as precious and personally stretching as your graduate education takes a special kind of courage and perseverance. Caitlin's innovative social work internship and research project illustrate everything I have talked about: creative and interprofessional partnerships that address health service needs in rural communities. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Caitlin Cecil. Thank you so much.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to share my experience. My name is Caitlin Cecil, and I'm a Master of Social Work student at Salisbury University. For the past year, I've been working to integrate social work into a local community pharmacy, Apple Discount Drugs, as part of SU's commitment to rural healthcare initiatives. This project is rooted in addressing social determinants of health, things like access to food, transportation, housing, and social support, that directly impacts a patient's ability to adhere to treatment plans and manage their chronic illness. By embedding social work in the pharmacy, we are reaching people at one of the most accessible points of care. This impact has been twofold. Patients are receiving whole person support that improves their ability to manage their health, and students like me are learning how to apply social work skills and research skills in innovative professional settings. This initiative has also created increased collaboration across the University System of Maryland. In working with students and faculty from the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, I've seen firsthand how pharmacists, physician assistants, and social workers can partner to provide care that addresses both medical and social needs. Together, we are building inventive models of care that could be replicated in other rural communities. Most recently, I had the opportunity to present this work at an international conference in Copenhagen, where it sparked meaningful conversations about the role of social workers in pharmacy practice. While at this conference, this work caught the attention of other universities' School of Social Work. I'm excited to share that discussion for future exploration of how to adapt this model to bring more interprofessional collaboration to their own students has begun. That kind of real interest reinforces the power of university system collaboration and creating stronger and more unique learning opportunities for students across many disciplines, while improving care for communities we serve in real time during internships. What excites me most is that this work not only benefits the community, but creates opportunities for students like me to learn and lead in professional settings. My experience in the SU MSW program shows that when students and institutions come together, we gain the skills and perspective needed to address health inequities in rural areas more effectively. Collaborative approaches like this not only strengthen rural healthcare and advance health equity, but also demonstrate how academic partnerships can be so beneficial in shaping the future of training and practice in monumental ways. Thanks so much for your attention. Now I'd like to introduce you to a fellow student, Leah Wynn.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Wynn, and I'm a junior majoring in public health with a minor in political science here at Salisbury University. I am so thankful to be called to speak to the Board of Regents today to discuss the activities I'm involved in at Salisbury University that support rural health on the Eastern Shore. As a freshman, I stumbled upon an opportunity that became the pinnacle of my college experience and the thing I am most proud of. This position has given me the opportunity to impact so many college students as well as my surrounding community. That opportunity, you may be wondering, is my position as a peer health educator funded through the True U Maryland grant, sponsored by a federal grant through the Maryland Department of Health. This educator position also allowed me to become vice president of Project KISS. This is an acronym for Project Keep It Sexually Safe. This is a student-run organization where my colleagues and I educate those interested on STIs and STDs, birth control options, pregnancy prevention, how to use safe sex items, as well as unhealthy relationships. In addition, as a peer health educator in this organization, we often raise awareness for mental health, domestic violence, and safe sex through tabling events such as our monthly Popping for Public Health events. Earlier this year, under the direction of Dr. Long White and Jeffrey Willie in nursing, Salisbury University became recognized as an overdose response program through the Maryland Department of Health. My fellow peer health educators and I were trained to facilitate trainings on opioids and Narcan, including the distribution of Narcan. Since that time, we have provided training to students, staff, and faculty on how to use Narcan and respond to a suspected opioid overdose. This semester alone, we are on track to train over 300 individuals on campus with the goal of at least 600 by the end of May of 2026. In addition to all of these initiatives, we cannot forget that sexual education is not just one size fits all or simply for the heterosexual populations. Therefore, an additional training that we have all been well versed in is titled Include. This is a workshop-oriented training that focuses on LGBTQ+ inclusive sexual education. It is not just simply sex ed, however, because the workshop also focuses on how LGBTQ youth can properly interact with medical professionals in order to destigmatize the stereotypes and create a more peaceful and honest experience in the doctor's office. This workshop is also oriented in the reverse, where medical professionals can learn from LGBTQ youth in order to close the gap. Lastly, when thinking about educating the youth on sensitive topics, my colleagues and I often think of creative approaches to take regarding sexual health and wellness. One of our biggest programs that we put on annually is called our Rubber One-Way Fashion Show, where we not only raise awareness for HIV and AIDS and STI prevention, but in a more creative fashion, making condom garments to destigmatize the use of safe sex tools. Moreover, the opportunity to be a peer health educator has not only broadened my leadership and mentorship skills, but has also given me the opportunity this past April to serve as a guest panelist at the Maryland Adolescent Health Conference in Owings Mills to discuss this very thing. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Deneen Long White, Associate Professor in the Public Health Program here at Salisbury University, as well as my mentor and advisor. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to briefly share our work that we're doing here on campus and in the community to make a difference in the lives of others here on the Eastern Shore. Leah just shared with you the work that we're doing on campus with students, as well as our future activities, which will reach well over 600 individuals this academic year, just on campus. Another activity is focused on building the public health workforce infrastructure here on the Eastern Shore. As many of you may know, the Eastern Shore is suffering from an opioid epidemic, which affects not only the individuals who are addicted to opioids, but also their families. I serve as the project director, principal investigator for the Salisbury University Eastern Shore Opioid Impacted Family Support Training Program, mouthful, OIFSP. This program is funded through HRSA and has been in existence for 5 years. The goal of the program is to increase the number of behavioral health-related paraprofessionals who work in integrated interprofessional teams, providing services to families impacted by substance use in the 9 counties of Maryland's Eastern Shore. The program includes an apprenticeship program, component where trainees are placed in community-based organizations and work for 1 year as CHW opioid navigators. Over the course of the initial 4 years, we trained 78 individuals to serve as community health worker opioid navigators. Over 75% of those individuals, well over the required 50% by the federal government, went on to serve as apprentices. We just completed our first year of our second round of 4-year funding, where we trained 21 individuals. The next cohort begins in October, and I'm told by my project coordinator that we already have 23 individuals signed up for the training. And we still have information sessions scheduled to recruit more. As a result, we will end up with a wait list for next October's cohort again. Furthermore, with carryover funds, we were able to train 7 community health worker opioid navigators to serve as peer recovery specialists. These individuals are currently working in Wycomico and Somerset counties. Recently, the OIFSP program held a 1-day rural health conference, which not only focused on the use of paraprofessionals to build the rural healthcare workforce infrastructure, but also provided afternoon skills building sessions on SBIRT, motivational interviewing, and harm reduction. There were 98 healthcare professionals in attendance at that conference. And I think the really exciting thing that came out of that was that at the end of the day, we all got together and talked about what our next steps as a collective community will be to address healthcare in our rural communities. In addition to this work, in collaboration with several community partners, we were able to train and distribute 1,356 doses of Narcan across Dorchester, Wycomico, Somerset, and Worcester counties this summer, which equates to 678 individuals being trained in the use of Narcan and what to do if faced with a possible opioid overdose. This is above and beyond what we're doing here on campus. During this time, we heard from our partners about the need to have access to low or no-cost fentanyl and xylene test strips for their clients. As a recognized Maryland Department of Health overdose response program, we are able to obtain free Narcan and test strips to provide to whoever we train and our community-based organizations. So as a result, moving forward, we're not only going to be providing the community-based organizations with free Narcan, but also test strips for their clients. Keeping in mind our focus on rural health and the need to build the skills of our future leaders, many of our undergraduate public health program courses have incorporated rural health-focused topics within these courses. These are just a few of the things that we are doing here on campus and in the community to improve the health of the individuals living on the Eastern Shore. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for being here with us today to talk about the impact. And I just want to close by thanking all of you for your continued support of Salisbury University and helping us to continue to do this and much, much more in terms of impactful work on the Eastern Shore. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time this morning.
I've asked the chair whether I can make a comment. I am so impressed with the number of times I heard the word interprofessionalism today, the ability to learn to work with each other and appreciate each other. I salute you all of you who spoke and your colleagues for that. And a special salute to 2 presidents, President LaPree and President Anderson. Did you all hear these programs that they are sharing, that they're building together? It's an example for all of us, so kudos.
And thank you for those really moving presentations. I don't think any of us appreciated the level and depth of the work that's going on in this area, so thank you. Our next agenda item includes a period for public comment. In accordance with the guidelines for public comment, which are posted on the USM website, 15 minutes set aside for this purpose. We request that any request for public comment be submitted 48 hours prior to the meeting. Seeing we received no comments that met this criteria for this meeting, I will be moving directly to the educational forum. And today, we are very pleased to have with us an expert in this area. As part of each board meeting, we host an education forum to offer a deep dive into an area related to board governance and system operation. In the past few years, we've invited Janet Judge, a nationally recognized expert on Title IX, to conduct training with the board on Title IX regulations. As there continues to be changes to this regulation, we've asked her back to provide another update. In addition to speaking to Title IX, Ms. Judge will also tee up the October 31st Education Forum, which will focus on Title VI. Welcome back, Janet.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Board of Regents, presidents, faculty, staff, students, and members of the community. I am so very impressed every time I come to this meeting to hear about the amazing things that you're doing in your programs. And today, personally impacted since I lost my brother to an opioid overdose. And so I have so much appreciation for the work and the destigmatization that you are putting into that work and around public health. What an amazing group of students and faculty you all have. This is my third appearance. You are perhaps the best trained Board of Regents in the area of Title IX in the country, and it was very interesting to bring me in at a time where every time I appear before you, I bring a new set of regulations to be applied to your programs. And I will go through that, but I would like to take a moment to recognize your presidents and their faculty and staff, because they have had to deal with new sets of rules every year, new policies and procedures, new debates. And in the educational context, those are quite amazing things. And it is also quite expensive to be implementing all of these changes to the regulatory guidance in their athletics, in their general programs, also has impact in the athletics area, which I will talk about as well. So with that, let's begin. A reminder, Title IX is passed in 1972, is a general anti-discrimination statute. Again, focus on the discrimination part, just saying that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, denied the benefits of, or subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. That last term, that federal financial assistance, has always been something we've been talking about in terms of whether or not schools are covered entities under the law. Federal financial assistance has a much broader meaning now in terms of an enforcement mechanism being used by the Trump administration that has been in place since the law was passed, but had not been used by any prior administration, other than some significant threats that they might use it when schools were not cooperating in past cases. So how does Title IX apply in the sexual misconduct space? And we will do a very high-level overview of the sexual misconduct space, but also talk about the many different ways that Title IX has come into play in the last year. It's a federal law that prohibits discrimination based on sex, as we talked about, but that also includes sexual harassment and violence, including relationship violence and stalking. We found when we started to pay attention to the stalking component that there were significant instances of stalking happening on our campuses, and that this was an area that was severely unreported because people didn't understand that they had a right to seek assistance when it came to stalking behaviors. For the most part, when we're talking about the discrimination piece, we're talking about whether or not these behaviors impact a person's ability to fully and freely access their educational opportunities. So what we're trying to do is make sure that instances of sexual misconduct or sexual discrimination do not negatively impact a person's ability to fully benefit from their educational opportunities. Title IX is a spending clause statute, meaning the federal government gives schools federal funding, and in response, schools promise not to discriminate on the basis of sex. And under Title VI, we'll talk about on the basis of race and other national origin and other protected classifications. The Trump administration has used a variety of federal agencies to implement enforcement actions and freeze various sources of federal funding, and we've also seen significant litigation as a result of that. It's been an interesting time to where we've really tested what are the procedural regulations in place, how they may play out, what the government really has the ability to do or may not have the ability to do, and we are seeing an interesting time to be a lawyer. Let me just say that as we go through and read the very, very thoughtful opinions that I think our judiciary are putting together in this space. We've seen a number of directed investigations, meaning the federal government has taken upon themselves to investigate institutions that they believe are violating federal civil rights laws, and schools are taking steps to try and adjust and respond in a very new enforcement space where they may be reading in the news that their federal funding has been frozen in the same way you and I read about it in the news. So I'm saying no advance notice, but rather reading about it in the news. As has always been the case, agencies may refer complaints to the Department of Justice for enforcement, and the Department of Justice may transfer cases to agencies for investigation, and litigation may be brought privately by complainants and respondents. We have seen not only the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, which was traditionally the chief agency charged with the enforcement of Title IX on college campuses across the country, but we've now seen Department of Agriculture, Department of Energy, Health and Human Services, and other federal agencies get into the mix of enforcing Title IX. Part of it is also looking at the federal funding that those agencies have and that they have extended to their schools to be able to say, that they are thinking about whether or not they will continue to extend that federal funding based on an area that traditionally the Department of Education has enforced, Title IX. We've also seen a real shift in the staffing at the federal level. As we have heard, on the one hand, we have heard that the federal government is hoping to put the Department of Education out of business. On the other hand, we have seen the Department of Education be very instrumental and involved in a lot of the cases that we have seen to date. In March of 2025, there was a significant reduction in force at the Department of Education. More than 2,000 staff members no longer have their job. It closed a number of offices. Those of us who practice in this area, we had cases pending in those offices. And for the most part, we have not heard anything about those cases since those offices have been closed, although it is our understanding that those cases have been transferred to the regional offices that remain open. We've also seen a shift in enforcement priorities with respect to Title IX, federal funding, as I noted, and will continue to note, and a delegation of enforcement activity to the Department of Justice and other agencies, as we discussed. Now, all presidents use executive orders. This president uses executive orders early and often, and there has been a lot of time, energy, and thought on the part of those who are on your college campuses trying to make sense of what these executive orders may mean for their day-to-day life. What is an executive order? It's an official, legally binding order directing federal agencies on how to implement the laws or policies. So basically, you have an administration saying this is going to be our enforcement priority and how we look to enforce these laws. But they are not laws in and of themselves. They can't change laws, and that's why they don't require congressional approval. although we're having a lot of litigation right now about whether or not the subject matter of some of these EOs do actually try to change existing laws. They guide administrative enforcement focus and strategy. Administrations issue them all the time, and then subsequent administrations overturn them. So let's talk about Title IX. The definition of sex has very much been the focus of this administration. We have always talked about Title IX and have made assumptions about the word sex, but now we are having a very, very high-profile discussion about what that term means. In executive order, the Trump administration made it very clear early on how they perceive the word sex to apply under Title IX. In their executive order entitled Defending Women from Gender Ideology, Extremism, and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government, this administration has stated that sex shall refer to an individual's immutable biological classification as either male or female, and sex is not a synonym for and does not include the concept of gender identity. So definitely put out how they intend to enforce these laws in a very clear way. A reminder, we have the Supreme Court decision in Bostock, which said that Title VII, sex discrimination in the employment context, federal law, covers LGBTQ individuals, and in particular transgender individuals from discrimination on the basis of sex consistent with their gender identity. We have had an interim decision in a federal district court in the Tennessee v. Cardona case, which stated that that definition, the Bostock definition in the Title IX context, should not be extended to the Title VII context, should not be extended to Title IX. Ultimately, this will be something that will be decided by the Supreme Court, I imagine. How has this played out? Well, it's been most high profile, has been playing out in the athletics context. The administration issued EO 14201, Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports, which incorporated the definition of sex that I just talked about. 1 day later, the NCAA updated its participation policy for transgender student athletes who had been permitted to participate consistent with their gender identity, provided they met all the NGB, the National Governing Body, sport protocols and requirements for their sport. February 12th, the Trump administration rescinded the Biden Title IX NIL guidance for those of you who have been following the House case with respect to Division I sports and the allocation of direct payments by schools that are now permitted up to $20.5 million per year. The Biden administration had said that those dollars were covered under Title IX and that men and women should be treated equitably in the allocation of those dollars. The Trump administration summarily withdrew that guidance without addressing any of the legal arguments that were set forth in the fact sheet, and suggested that a court would have to decide that issue. On July 3rd, the Supreme Court announced that it would hear the two transgender athlete cases. One has been withdrawn, and so we will see how the Supreme Court will come to this particular case. We have a significant amount of civil litigation around transgender sport cases, and we also have a number of directed investigations by the federal government. We've also had the administration come out with a Saving College Sports executive order just recently, and in that they reiterated Title IX's application to sports among a variety of other areas, including a commitment to Olympic sports, again, without the force of law or any particular specifics. So here we are on the Title IX regulatory update. We are back to the 2020 regulations. Those regulations took effect on August 14th, and then the Biden administration published an NPRM rulemaking. They went through the rulemaking process and came out with new regulations, which were called the 2024 regulations. Maryland updated all of their policies and procedures and were very diligent and did all the work. We're back to the 2020 regulations again. And because we have had a ruling in the Tennessee versus Cardona case that held that the Department of Education has exceeded its authority and enjoined the application of the 2024 regulations, mostly around its express application of gender identity in the definition of what's protected as sex protection. On February 4th, 2025, the DCL, the government issued a Dear Colleague letter that stated that it would be enforcing the 2020 version of the Title IX regulations. The key differences are related to scope of protections, the definitions of harassment, and the procedural requirements. I'm just going to run through some of the definitions from a high level so you're clear. The enforcement directive said federal agencies and departments are directed to enforce all sex protective laws to promote the reality that there are two sexes, male and female, and that these sexes are not changeable and are grounded in fundamental and incontrovertible reality. They also, in that memo, said that they would be enforcing the 2020 version of the regulations. The difference in the definition of sex-based harassment is somewhat different, obviously, since that was the crux of the disagreement. The 2024 regulations stated that sex discrimination includes harassment based on sexual orientation, gender identity, sex characteristics, pregnancy, parental status, and lactation. The 2020 regulations do not explicitly include any of these protections. The hostile environment threshold, the 2024 regulations required only that conduct be severe or pervasive and objectively offensive, which encompassed a broader range of prohibited conduct than the 2020 regulations, which require severe and pervasive. Initiating a complaint is quite different between the two sets of regulations. The 2020 regulations require a formal written complaint signed by the complainant or the Title IX coordinator in cases where you may have a reluctant complainant in order to move forward with an investigation. The 2024 regulations were much more broad. They removed the requirement of a formal complaint to start an investigation and instead allowed an investigation to be initiated at any report of sex discrimination. Jurisdiction is different as well. The 2020 regulations generally only covered conduct that occurred within the school's education program or activity. The 2024 regulations extended the school's responsibility to address sex-based harassment and conduct that occurred outside of school's education program or activity, provided it created a hostile environment within the school's program. There are also key procedural differences in hearings. The 2020 regulations, and you're likely to remember this, mandate live hearings with cross-examination by a party's advisor. The 2024 regulations made live hearings optional and allowed schools much more investigatory flexibility and allowed for one-person systems, so the investigator could also be the adjudicator. The standard of evidence is also something that has changed, although it's just a minor change, but both under the 2020 regulations, you're required to have clear and convincing evidence standard if that standard is used for student discipline. Otherwise, schools may use a preponderance of the evidence standard. As you might imagine, that's a pretty significant difference in standards when you're trying to make a determination on the facts. So what is prohibited now? Prohibited sexual harassment means conduct on the basis that satisfies one or more of the following. We have quid pro quo, meaning an employee conditioning the provision of an aid, benefit, or service on an individual's participation in unwelcome sexual conduct. We had cases, for example, where somebody would say, I'm grading your paper tonight, or I'm thinking about, endorsing your application for grad school, but, I would really like to speak to you about it over dinner tonight. And by the way, I'm going through a divorce. The hostile environment case, Unwelcome conduct determined by a reasonable person to be so severe, pervasive, and objectionably offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to an education program or activity. I would imagine we've all been the subject of hostile environment, maybe even this morning. Don't know how your lives are going these days. But again, in order to be at the discriminatory level, it would have to negatively impact your ability to access your learning opportunities. And then also sexual assault, as defined in the Clery Act, or dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking, as defined by the Violence Against Women Act. What is the scope of the institutional Title IX responsibility? A school must respond promptly in a manner that is not deliberately indifferent when it has actual knowledge of sexual harassment occurring within the school's education program or activity against a person in the United States. So actual knowledge is important. That's notice of sexual harassment or reports of alleged prohibited conduct to a Title IX coordinator or any person with the authority to institute corrective measures other than the alleged respondent. And let's just break that down for a second. That would be anybody who could implement disciplinary action or be involved in Title IX proceedings. That could be anything from, somebody involved with the Title IX process to, in instances, faculty members, people who sit on boards, college coaches, and a variety of others. They don't say who are these OWAs, I like to call them, and who are not, so schools have to do the work of determining who will place, who, when they have knowledge of sexual misconduct, owns that knowledge for the institution. Schools may decide to adopt a broader definition of mandatory reporter. It's up to each individual institution. But here's another place where there have been differing interpretations of Title IX for the last 3 years on your college campuses. And so your people are being told that they will bind the school, they won't bind the school, they have to report, maybe they don't have to report. So there's a lot going into the work that's being done by the folks on the ground here. Sexual assault, we'll just go through the definition because any training for it to be meaningful means that you walk away knowing exactly what is prohibited, having or attempted to have non-consensual sexual intercourse or sexual contact with another individual without consent. I'd note that consent is not defined under the regulations. And thank you to the good students who are doing the work around consent. Sexual contact is a broad term, could include the touching of various body parts, behaviors like rape, fondling, incest, and lack of consent includes situations involving the use of threat or force or coercion or where an individual is incapacitated. Sexual assault may but does not require any form of penetration. We've had a lot of discussion around sort of the gray area where individuals are intoxicated and whether or not the person who may decide to withdraw their consent is permitted to do so at any time, and the law is quite clear. You are permitted to withdraw consent at any time, and that is binding. Intimate partner violence, this is one that I think we all are always on a learning curve around what is covered in this, includes but it's not limited to sexual or physical abuse or the threat of such abuse. And the two different classifications, the dating violence is a person who's in or has been in a romantic or intimate relationship with the victim. That was a little bit of a laugh, not because I don't take this quite seriously, I do, but determining what it means to be dating someone in this day and age is always quite interesting concept. Domestic violence committed by a current or former spouse or intimate partner of the victim or someone similarly situated, a person with whom the victim shares a child in common, or any other person against an adult or youth victim who is protected from that person's acts under domestic or family violence laws. And then finally, stalking. A course of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety, fear for the safety of others, in other words, where their family members, friends, or others are threatened or suffer substantial emotional distress. It includes cyberstalking and other forms of unwelcome contact with another person. I'd just like you to sit back for a second and think about those definitions and the work that your individual schools are doing to try and track those sorts of behaviors, interpret them, adjudicate them, and figure it all out. A school's education program or activity includes locations, events, or circumstances over which you have control. So you're mostly looking on campus, but if you're off campus and you're controlled by that particular education activity, that would also be covered, provided it's not outside the United States. Right. Also includes buildings owned or controlled by student organizations, which is always an interesting inquiry, and would go to. That's where we're looking at fraternities, sororities, and official recognition. Also looking at the athletic houses that may exist. Liability standard is deliberate indifference. So a school must not act with deliberate indifference once it has actual knowledge. And it was deliberately indifferent only if its response to sexual harassment is unreasonable in light of the known circumstances. You must treat your parties equitably. We'll talk about that very quickly. Follow your procedures. And we've had situations where schools have been found in violation of Title VI and Title IX, but have found that their policies and procedures comply with the law. It's just the way that they have been implementing them on their campuses. Under the regulations, it expressly says that the government will not find deliberate indifference solely because they would have reached a different determination of responsibility when weighing the evidence. That's quite important. So here's just an overview. Once you have notice of response to notice, you have to contact the complainant, offer supportive services, explain the formal complaint process, and provide a copy of the grievance procedures. So the Title IX coordinator has the responsibility to promptly contact the complainant, and a person is deemed to be a complainant even if they weren't the ones to bring the information forward, to discuss and consider their wishes regarding supportive measures. Again, schools are required to provide supportive measures even if there are not formal complaints. Supportive measures are designed to restore or preserve someone's access to their education program, and explain the process for filing a formal complaint. As I said before, the formal complaints trigger school's grievance process, including informal resolution. You are not permitted to engage in informal resolution without a formal complaint. And the complaint must be filed by the complainant participating in or attempting to participate in the school's education program. It's specified for that because the 2024 regulations actually were broader. They allowed people outside to file complaints. It must be signed by the complainant or the Title IX coordinator. Again, a Title IX coordinator would come in and sign the complaint when they have concerns about what they have knowledge about, but the individual complainant is not willing to move forward. You can imagine how difficult it is to prove allegations or to have discussions around those allegations if you have a reluctant complainant or other witnesses. So complaints signed by the title coordinator are very difficult to pursue. It must allege sexual harassment and request the investigation. Once there is a formal complaint, school is required to file their Title IX grievance process, which hopefully is in compliance with the law, to treat parties equitably in all aspects of the implementation of that policy, provide equitable notice throughout, conduct a fair investigation, and have live hearing. An important piece of the Title IX regulations is that there are written notice of allegations to the parties. So there was some concern in the Title IX space that people would show up at meetings and have no idea what they had been accused of. They were not able to prepare. So this was designed to make sure that people are quite clear about the identity of the parties, if known, the conduct that is alleged to constitute sexual harassment, and the date and location of the incidents, if they're known. Also, it was very important to be included that the respondent is presumed not responsible for the alleged conduct until and if there is a finding of responsibility at the conclusion of the grievance process. Individuals have a right to advisors throughout the process. Emergency removals, I include this every time because it's important and will become more and more important. If you bear with me, I do a lot of work in the athletics context, and now with the House case and the fact that we have so much money involved in athletics and individuals, and that if a person does not participate in an athletics event, there is an allegation now that there are real significant financial damages associated with that. So there will be very, very intense scrutiny on schools if they decide to withhold people from competition. The emergency removal provision of the regulations are quite clear. You have to conduct an individual safety and risk analysis and then remove somebody only if you determine that the respondent poses an imminent threat to the physical health or safety of anyone justifying removal. Physical health, not emotional, not mental, not other aspects, but it's a very high standard. It's something that will be revisited throughout the course of somebody being removed, and it also is something that has been challenged on college campuses across the country. Informal resolution is permitted, but there are also rules associated with that. That was in response to concerns people had about how the informal resolution process went and what could be done with the individual disclosures that people may make in the informal process if they decide that the informal process is not working and they want to go back to the formal process. So schools have to make quite clear how that information might be used and make sure people have really meaningful engagement in the process. So when you're investigating a formal complaint, you have to, again, treat the parties equitably. The school has the burden of proof in gathering evidence. There was concern that students were required to sort of walk schools through what evidence they had to secure. There was a broad evidentiary standard. It's not governed by the rules of evidence, the federal rules of evidence. Always have to have advance notice and meaningful notice to parties and advisors of meetings along the way. And then the opportunity to inspect evidence and provide written response before an investigation report is completed. Again, we talked about a fair process with live hearings, a cross-examination by an advisor. It's probably the number one criticism of the 2020 regulations requiring this cross-examination and live hearing. Relevancy determinations in real time by, sorry for that spelling error, in real time by the person who is running the hearing, written findings and remedies, and an equitable opportunity to appeal. The regulations also require training of those people who are involved in your Title IX process with very specific components to be covered in the training. The training materials cannot rely on sex stereotyping. It has to promote impartial investigations and adjudications, address bias, and it has to be posted on the website because there was a concern that the training materials were biased and that people were not getting full and complete information around what the law required. Retaliation is prohibited under Title IX, so people who participate in these proceedings, who bring forward complaints, are protected from retaliation, and if someone makes a complaint, also entitled to have that complaint resolved according to the regulations. That's Title IX. If anyone has any quick questions before we run to Title VI, which will be much more abbreviated version. Yes, please.
Start with Drew.
Thanks. I know at some of our campuses, not all undergraduate students who are teaching assistants are required to undergo Title IX training, just as graduate teaching assistants are. Would you say that, or would you know whether undergraduate teaching assistants would be considered under the standard of somebody who has the authority to institute corrective measures? And if so, would that be a liability if not all campuses require that training for them?
I think it's a great question. It is a fact-specific inquiry for individual campuses about whether or not they do have the authority, so I'm not able to answer your question. Hey, I'm a huge proponent for the training, obviously. That's why I'm here. And I also think because we've had so much changeover in Title IX, that the interesting part is it doesn't require training of your students, right? I think about all the people it requires training of, but it doesn't require training of your students. I do think but Clery and other laws do require that training. Overtraining is always a good thing, but I can't stand in the shoes of your individual institutions.
Thanks.
Great question, though. Thank you.
Bill?
Thank you very much for coming and giving us this very interesting and informative brief. Really do appreciate it. My question is, do you have any specific advice to those who distribute name, image, and likeness money and house settlement funds to male and female athletes to comply with equity requirements and other requirements of Title IX to avoid litigation. I know we're in a murky area, but do you have any specific advice to give those folks who make those decisions?
Every year you ask the question that gets right to the heart of the matter, don't you, sir? I am not here as your counsel on Title IX implementation in the athletic space, but I do spend a lot of time here, so I'll just speak not as your counsel, but just to outline. There is a difference of opinion, quite strongly held out there right now. There is, the position that was put forth in the fact sheet by the Biden administration that such direct payments by institutions, not the third-party payments that the House agreement also allows, but the direct payments by the institutions, because they are being made with institutional funds, no matter what the source of those funds, become institution dollars subject to Title IX, and that the payment of these dollars would be covered as financial assistance under the law. Now, the counter argument is that Title IX did not anticipate these direct payments, and so there may be a novel interpretation of the law. To be clear, I think schools have taken a two-step approach. They have looked at the total funds that they intend to distribute annually, and then they allocate those funds to their programs, and then in turn, the programs allocate those funds to student athletes as NIL deals. Title IX has long held that revenue is not a non-discriminatory defense for those initial allocations, right? So the initial decision to perhaps, and we're seeing across the country, 75 to 90% of those dollars going to male student athletes and the remainder to female student athletes. The second inquiry, which will come, is whether or not they are true NIL deals and have been valued for NIL fair market value. The House agreement does not require that schools do any fair market valuation with respect to the deals as to a student athlete's NIL value. There is a whole system set forth for third-party payments that require a valid business purpose and a fair market valuation. So whether or not schools will be able to produce that sort of information to defend their payments will be another aspect of the discussion. So there's no easy answer. And I think schools are making very difficult risk-benefit analysis when it comes to the Title IX payments in the competitive spaces. Is that
Ellen? Your mic.
Are summer camps considered activities even if they are not school campus sponsored?
if they're happening on the schools, they are considered activities, right? And schools have been requiring that their staff and that their staff undergo Title IX training. Some have taken out sexual misconduct insurance policies, a whole variety of different things. I think schools have worked very hard to make sure that their summer camp activities are covered. Summer camp activities, as you well know, just because of how you phrase that particular question, are being operated in a whole variety of legal entities across. And I think the degree of engagement of the school comes into play, but for the most part, when you're hosting summer camps on your campus, you have to be cognizant of Title IX responsibilities. Yes.
Tom?
Yes. Janet, it's great to have you here. I always admire your expertise in these issues very much, and we appreciate your perspective on this stuff. I sent a note out to a couple of the regents earlier this year after a June story by Michael McCann and Dan Lisbeth to Dan Livett, two respected journalists, about several schools are setting up financial reserves because of the House settlement, and some are doing it several million, some are doing as much as 20 million. I asked Dave Mosca, since I just took over as chair of the audit committee, see if we could get more detail on this. We found out that no Big Ten no Big Ten school has established any reserve. So, I mean, the issue for me is not if this is going to happen, when it's all going to happen, when we're going to have litigation throughout the system. There is already some, but it's obviously going to be more and more as we go forward. And so my question to you is, and I'm not going to ask you for legal advice here, I'm going to ask in a different way. If you were president of a university, would you support setting up financial reserves because of future Title IX liabilities?
For those of you who are wondering what we've been talking about for the last little bit, the House litigation is a series of three antitrust lawsuits that challenged the NCAA rules that they said restricted student athletes' ability to benefit financially from their name, image, and likeness. Another case had a pay-for-play component, and others had video games and other aspects. There was a settlement in that case. The settlement is on appeal, being challenged on appeal under Title IX grounds, both with respect to $2.8 billion in back damages and with respect to the injunctive relief moving forward, which is what these questions have been about. NCAA Division I schools, FB football bowl subdivision schools, and then those Division I schools who choose to opt into that settlement, and many are permitted but not required to issue direct payments to their student athletes in exchange for their name, image, and likeness. The NCAA rules still prohibit paying athletes for play, right? Pay for play, you'll see often in the way these discussions. So schools at the Big Ten and the Power Four conference level have, for the most part, because of the competitiveness associated with college sports right now and wanting to be in the right place at the right time around conference reshuffling, when that may come again, have been issuing those payments. Tom, with respect to your question, it's a great question. I think that there is not punitive damages. There are no punitive damages associated with violations of Title IX, but the Title IX issues involved in these House payments are not only the payments themselves, but your compliance by school of your Title IX program throughout, because they will be structured as class action settlements. I think every college president should be concerned about compliance with Title IX and every other civil rights law, just because you care about your students and you care about equity, but also because noncompliance, as we're seeing in the federal freeze discussion, will be an avenue to come into an institution to get at your federal funding. There's also a concern that these payments may provide evidence of employment rather than student athlete athletics participation, and even the legislation that's being proposed at the federal level has a very limited discussion of an employment exemption only related to the fact that somebody's a student athlete and what they need to do to be a student athlete, and not all the other things that are going on in athletics. So in the interest of time, and I've already really exceeded my time, if I was the president, would I be concerned about the House settlement generally? Yes. Would I be concerned about the leveraging? Yes. I imagine that everybody who's affected has had many conversations with their board and executive bodies. And I would be the last person in the world to come and tell any president how to run their institution. So that's my answer.
Well, I tried. But it is a real serious issue because, I mean, think about potentially down the road, if litigation is successful, schools that have been allocating $1 million to women's sports and 19 million to men could find themselves in a very significant liability, and that's multiplied across the country. So thank you. I didn't expect a real answer, but I admire your expertise tremendously. Thank you very much.
All right, let's move on to
On to
Title VI.
Title VI is another federal anti-discrimination statute, like Title IX, 37 words. Here, we're talking about discrimination on the basis of actual or perceived race, color, or national origin, any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. It has been interpreted to also include shared ancestry and ethnic characteristics, and that's where we've seen a lot of the litigation and the federal funding cases. Well, what is the shared ancestry, and how is that different from, for example, religious discrimination? So, for example, if somebody was prohibited from joining a finals club or a fraternity or sorority or something else on the basis of their religion, that would not be covered by Title VI. However, if there was a feeling about being a citizen of a particular country that is associated with a dominant religion or their identity, or somebody perceived to be from that country, or, and stereotypical assumptions about being from that country or being part of that identity, that would be covered under the shared ancestry. Also, racial, ethnic, ancestral slurs or stereotypes, or discriminating against a person or harassing a person because of how that person looks, skin color, physical features, or how they dress, if that dress is consistent with certain national origin concepts. Context matters, of course. And so if you had a problem with a hairstyle, if that hairstyle was something that was related to shared ancestry, that would be something that you'd be talking about. But if it's just just a haircut that you're not happy with and has no association, that would not be covered. Also covers groups of students who may get together and speak in a foreign language, students who may speak with a foreign accent in school or in groups if they are being discriminated on the basis of that. There are a number of schools, 60 or more, who are working through whether or not they have Title VI liability. Schools must take immediate and appropriate action. All the things I'm talking about in response are going to sound very similar to the Title IX context, although Title VI is not as specific in their regulations. Response will vary depending on the nature of the allegations, obviously, the source of the complaint, the age of the students, the size of the administration structure of the school, and other factors, which sort of harkens back to an earlier version of the Title IX regulations. In all cases, it should be prompt, thorough, and impartial response designed to place the students back in an equitable opportunity to benefit from their educational program or benefits. The Trump administration has changed its standard to deliberate indifference, the same as the Title IX sexual misconduct standard. So Title IX enforcement, I'm just going to go through this quite quickly, but there has always been a very specific procedure required of the federal government in order to take away or freeze federal funding. We have, it's not been something that people have spent a lot of time on because the federal funds have not been used as an enforcement lever in the past, although it always was looming out there. But now that it has come to fruition in many instances, there are a lot of lawyers scrambling to go back and dust off the regulations and to determine the adequate procedures. For the most part, in the litigation that you're seeing around the freezing of federal funds, a lot of the pushback has been that the federal government did not check off the boxes. They didn't abide by the required procedural rules before they were allowed to freeze funding, including a finding of a violation of the law after reasoned inquiry, interviews, conducting an investigation. The government has been leading with the federal fund freezing and then coming back later and issuing letters of finding. So this is just a long description of all the steps that schools should be taking the federal government should be taking before they are able to take away federal funding. And the reason is because when this option was put out there, there was an understanding of how crippling it would be to an institution if you took away their federal funding. Just think about what you just heard this morning of the very many amazing things that the students associated with Salisbury here are doing, and all tied to federal funding. We have already seen in a decision in the Harvard case, the court took the time to outline the kinds of research and activities that would be negatively impacted and have been negatively impacted by the federal funding freezes. We're seeing, right, the Columbia University case and the Harvard case. We have some other cases that are also coming up locally, not one of your schools. That's my daughter walking away in that picture. She just got her PhD in math at Columbia. I'm quite proud. Just stick it in there, right? And she also graduated her undergraduate from Harvard. These cases are real. She's still living there because at Columbia in student housing because her fiance, yes, she's getting married in December. Anybody has any tips, please let me know. Is in getting his PhD in machine learning, but I have been living through the Columbia and the Harvard cases and watching them quite closely. In the Columbia University case, there were 5 prongs of finding in the letter that was issued that they had a hostile environment that was objectively offensive, severe, pervasive. Educational environment has been impeded by the things that were happening on campus, that the school had actual knowledge, they had substantial control over the conduct, and in the face of the hostile environment, they were deliberately indifferent. They found that their process and procedures were inadequate, that when there was repeated vandalism, graffiti, and other things, they would clean it, but they didn't then, the allegation was they didn't then try and figure out who did it or take other actions to educate people on campus, failure to control harassment and discrimination during protests, and failure to enforce their time, place, manner restrictions that they had on campus. We're all following the Harvard case quite closely, I would imagine. On September 3rd, the federal district court judge issued a decision in Massachusetts in 2 related lawsuits in favor of Harvard, blocking the withholding of more than $2 billion in federal research grants. The court found that the administration unlawfully targeted Harvard's funding in retaliation for its protected First Amendment activity and in violation of procedural protections of Title VI, and because they were arbitrary and capricious under the Administrative Procedures Act. We often don't think of the First Amendment when we're thinking about private institutions, but when the government is conditioning how an institution teaches, who does the teaching, and how they do the teaching, and is coercive in that context, then the First Amendment plays out. Harvard had very good counsel in that case and prevailed. I think it is a very important decision. I encourage any of you involved in education to read that decision. It is 70+ pages long, but I think the judge did a very, very good job of talking about how important federal funding is to higher education itself, but also to the surrounding communities and to all of our well-being. So I encourage you to read it. We also know that the Maryland AG joined 19 other states, including Massachusetts, and with the District of Columbia as a friend of the court brief on Harvard's side. So you will hear more about that, I imagine, in your next briefing. Also was a decision in Maryland that enjoined the DEI interpretation of the Trump administration, basically that schools should eradicate all vestiges of DEI. And we had a decision in August by a judge here in Maryland who said that the government exceeded their authority in so doing. Another great case to read, and I encourage all of you to do that. And with that, I believe we were all educated.
Yeah.
Any questions on that?
Other questions for Janet?
I went quite long. I apologize, but I love being here with you all and thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Your insights are Janet, we always find your insights are timely and provide the foundation for board decision-making. So we look forward to our next get-together. We like to think we wouldn't have to keep getting together this way, but I have a feeling it's going to go on for a while. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the Chancellor for the Chancellor's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Regent Stebbins, Regent Blount, Regent Speaks, Regent Rivera Forbes. I too look forward to our work together. And I'd also like to welcome the partnership of our new shared governance chairs, Mr. Vasquez Reyes, Dr. King White, and Mr. Prouty. And I also want to welcome Dr. Dale Nesbury, who is the interim executive director of the USM at Southern Maryland. Dr. Nesbury has a stand up, sir, so we can see you. Thank you. Dr. Nesbury is the interim executive director of the USM at Southern Maryland. He has long and deep experience in higher education, in technology and planning, and institutional effectiveness. And I also want to point out the national acclaim he's earned leading community colleges, which will surely strengthen our own partnerships in Southern Maryland and beyond. His arrival at Southern Maryland coincides with the center's new strategic plan, which is focused on building academic and career pathways in strengthening community collaborations, and of course, promoting student success, social mobility. Dale, we look forward to your leadership as we make good on those promises at our Southern Maryland Regional Higher Education Center. Thank you. I want to congratulate our Elkins professors, whose critically important work we advance through a competitive process through system-funded grants. So at Bowie State, we have Dr. Darshana Josula, who will establish a collaborative hub for adaptive human AI teaming, which is intended to ensure equitable access to AI research and education, and also advancing regional workforce development. At the University of Maryland, College Park, Dr. Elizabeth Smela is going to team with colleagues to develop an accessible certificate program in sustainability and foster cross-campus collaboration in sustainability projects. So that should fit very well with our Vice Chancellor for Sustainability's work. Thank you. And Professor Rabiat Ankane from UMB is going to continue her project exploring the history of European colonialism and its impact on contemporary international law. We're also celebrating 3 Elkins academic transformation winners. This year, we asked faculty to focus their application on generative AI because it is, of course, rapidly transforming the work that we do. And so at Towson University, Dr. Amanda Jaskowski will integrate generative AI into course design. At UMBC, Dr. Eric Stoken will develop open source training materials in computational social science and generative AI. And at UMGC, Dr. David Leisure will use generative AI to adapt and scale faculty coaching tools. So congratulations to all the winners. If you're paying attention, you know that this is the month I typically offer a rankings roundup, bragging about where we stand on all those various best of lists. So I'm holding off this year. I'm not going to do it fully because we're awaiting a few more rankings. But that's not to suggest I'm worried, because the ones we do have are among the most impressive we've seen. And so I want to mention some accolades that say as much about us, and particularly our values, as the more standard measures of excellence. For instance, Towson University and UMB have won the Excellence in Mental Health and Well-Being Award from Insight into Academia magazine. That award looks at the integration of accessible mental health services and programs that advance inclusive excellence, belonging, emotional resilience. Congratulations. College Park, UMB, and Towson are all ranked in the top 20 of Forbes' list of best employers in Maryland. And UMB made the magazine's list of America's best employers for women, ranking 36th among universities nationwide. College Park ranks 13th among U.S. public universities for graduating Pell students, a 6-year graduation rate above 82%. Towson is among the first 7 North American colleges earning Autism Inclusive Campus designation from the College Autism Network, recognizing campuses that create environments where autistic and other neurodivergent people can thrive. It builds on TU's leadership in autism education and community support for those populations for which it's known. Congratulations, President Ginsburg. In a similar vein, I'll mention UMGC's inclusion in the Generation Hope Family U cohort, helping UMGC support parent learners so they can access the economic mobility that lifts up their families. And let me end on the Princeton Review, which is again named the beautiful building that's hosting us today, the Guerreri Academic Commons, a top 25 college library. So these are not the rankings where we brag about our research prowess and that sort of thing, terribly important. These are rankings that say that we care about people. And I'm grateful for that. You know, you may have heard, I don't know, it's not too visible, that Salisbury is celebrating its centennial year. But that's the truth. And Salisbury's big birthday bash was accompanied by the SU Centennial Speaker Series, where our president here, President LaPree, was joined by former leaders for a behind-the-scenes look at Salisbury's really meteoric rise over the last quarter century. The rise is real. You saw some evidence of it today. Salisbury students are at the heart of it. One of Salisbury's enduring achievements is its success in producing Fulbright students. SU has 2 recipients this year. Chemistry major Anderson Herman, whose experience with malaria in his native Haiti has shaped his plans to pursue malaria research in the Slovak Republic. And you might remember his classmate, ESOL and Spanish major Vicky Vasquez, who was one of our student award winners last spring. She's now a Fulbright student pursuing a teacher's assistantship in Thailand. She's a former English learner herself, English language learner herself, and Vicky is going to bring her international experience back to her native Worcester County, where she'll serve vulnerable communities. Salisbury's Leanne Peach was named National Leader of the Year by the Omicron Delta Kappa Honor Society. Before graduating, Leanne, who's the SGA Chief of Staff, was Vice President of Salisbury's Food Pantry, co-editor-in-chief of its undergraduate research journal, and a community activist addressing period poverty in local schools. And Salisbury's Kay Funderburg has been named a Gilman Scholar by the U.S. State Department. That's a program that helps students with high financial need gain international experience and build global networks. She is going to study at Sweden's Linköping University. I would say, President LaPree, your students are an extraordinary credit to this extraordinary university. Again, thank you for hosting us. But I have to talk about students from other schools as well. And UMB School of Nursing, Dr. Gerald, is celebrating its first ever Fulbright student. Abayan Weze will travel to Cameroon, where she'll assess population vulnerability to cardiovascular disease. And I had mentioned the Gilman Scholarship earlier. College Park was just ranked 4th in the nation for Gilman recipients. 60 Terps earned that distinction. It's part of College Park's plan for inclusive global experience, and it's very impressive, President Pines. Let me stick with international education and note that study abroad engagement has grown enormously at UMES, where more students participated in study abroad over the last 2 years than in the previous 8 years combined. So a testament to intentional global programming. Further accolades acquired by our students and the people that teach them. UMB and Frostburg State are celebrating affirmation of their accreditation by the Middle States Commission. This is a painstaking, as you all extensive self-study, expansive engagement with every function, every ambition put under a microscope. President Gerald, President Smith, congratulations on the work and the outcome. I know of other successful accreditations that I can't talk about yet because they've been affirmed by because they have not been affirmed by the commission. But we need to be very proud of our universities. I've done accreditation work for a long time. And when I read what outside critical folks write when they come in and look at our institutions, I would tell you, Regents, plenty to be proud of. At Frostburg, every single student in its graduating physician assistant class passed the national certifying exam. Achievement. First-time pass rate is a very important metric proving program effectiveness. You can't get any better than perfect, right? Yeah. So congratulations, President Smith. And UMES celebrating full accreditation of its physician assistant program, together with outstanding student pass rates on the certifying exam. I know, Heidi, that this is the outcome of years of hard, methodical work. Scholarship. College Park and UMB have launched a BS MD program to recruit more engineers and data scientists into the clinical professions, where technology has transformed diagnosis and treatment. At UMBC Manfred, faculty have won a $3 million grant from the National Institute on Drug Abuse to adapt a therapy that helps patients with PTSD process their trauma by writing about it. The faculty are testing a version of the therapy with patients in treatment for substance abuse disorder. And College Park's Sean B. Carroll just won his third Emmy for science filmmaking. His latest documentary follows an evolutionary biologist's quest to find DNA in a soil sample that's 2 million years old. If we don't tell our stories, he said, how will anyone know what we do? How will anyone be inspired? That's a lesson for all of us in these days. How's this for inspiration? Coppin State is welcoming its largest first-year class in more than 25 years, with 1,000 plus new undergraduates flocking, Anthony, to Eagle Nation. And maybe even more important than the number, in an issue that we're all worried about in higher education, Coppin is bucking national trends with climbing enrollment among men. Male enrollment at Coppin has jumped 54% since 2021, reflecting strength not only in recruitment, but of course retention, where Coppin well outperforms national averages. And that work dovetails with Coppin's new 5-year strategic plan. Not modest goals, becoming a university of choice, nurturing students' holistic development, improving their completion rates. Well done. UMBC also has a record-breaking incoming class. More than 3,100 first-year and transfer students, its biggest ever wait list, which is something we need to do something about because we ought to take advantage of the fact that our institutions have large wait lists. We need to be system-oriented in that way, if I could preach a little bit. You know, with regard to UMBC, there's a lot of work behind the numbers. UMBC continues to build relationships in Baltimore City, offering guaranteed access for qualified city students, full funding for those whose families make under $80,000 a year. So does that work? Well, enrollment of Baltimore City students at UMBC is up 30% this year. So congratulations, Provost. Towson is welcoming more than 5,700 new and transfer students this year. Graduate enrollment, a big priority, has climbed nearly 6%, and retention is a marquee story at Towson. 91% of eligible undergraduates return to Towson for another year. And I would tell you, Regents, that without getting ahead of the final totals, so I'm not embarrassed, we're confident that system-wide enrollment this fall is going to exceed last year's enrollment. So, you know, we all hear about the dwindling of folks interested in believing in higher education. looks like we have fairly pervasive and persuasive evidence that Marylanders want what we provide, still. Pardon my attitude here. Of course, there's the other end of the college pipeline, the finishing, the careers that make the degree worth it. And so our universities keep innovating how they ensure that our students and our state get the very best return on their investments. Through a partnership with BioHub Maryland, Bowie State students are being trained in biopharma manufacturing. They're earning key certificates for life science careers. People want those graduates. The universities at Shady Grove teamed up with all 9 of its partner universities to showcase their academic programs to industry leaders across sectors. Employers shared their talent needs. USG shared how their students and alumni can and will fill them. So thank you, Dr. Bro, Dr. Kademian, for thinking about what the workforce demands are. UMGC is partnering with the Montgomery County Police Department to accelerate degree completion for department employees and their families, offering discounted tuition, college credit for police training and prior learning. You'll recall that UMGC piloted a similar program for military learners. To date, over 14,000 service members, U.S. service members, have earned 70,000 transfer credits for their prior military experience, which has saved these students over $17 million in tuition. Thank you, Greg. Towson is using a $1 million MHEC grant to support displaced federal workers who want to transition into teaching. You've got over 600 applicants, and it's the kind of program that will also make a dent in teacher classroom shortages. Let me turn for a moment to service that animates much of our work. You've heard about it today. UBALT is partnering with the Walters Art Museum to transform museum visits into interactive, gamified adventures. What happens there is that middle and high school students work through challenges that deepen their understanding of the artwork and its context. I wish that had been offered to me when I was told to go to an art museum. It's a model that could preserve meaningful field trips. President Morales Wilhelm continually tells me that we must show the economic impact of our work. So here's one impact. As you know, UMSES has seeded billions of juvenile oysters in the Bay. This is one of the world's largest oyster restoration projects. And since the restoration, watermen are bringing in about 475,000 bushels of oysters every year for a dockside value exceeding $18 million. In the 5 years prior to restoration, oyster hauls and values averaged less than a quarter of those numbers. And now the state has said it will formally meet its commitment to restore 5 oyster tributaries in the Bay. So, Fernando, impact. Let me tell you a story about USM at Hagerstown, working with Williamsport High School in Washington County. It is hosting the school's most vulnerable students, English language learners, students needing special education services, students experiencing housing insecurity, students with special medical needs. That's the work of a good neighbor. So thank you, Dr. Ashby. UMGC, awarding full scholarships to caregivers of sick and wounded service members, helping them restart the lives they've put on hold. UMB's Carey School of Law has launched Maryland's second Innocence Project. The first is famously hosted by UBalt. The aim isn't just to free innocent people, but to the point, preventing wrongful convictions in the first place. And Bowie State is eyeing MDOT's plans for transit-oriented development at BSU's Mark Station as a way to grow affordable housing and economic development in Greater Bowie. President Bro envisions this 5-acre mixed-use community as a conduit to the opportunities that come with connection. Congratulations. I want to end all of these achievements by saying that every single one of them is made possible by our USM staff. Chair Gooden mentioned at the meeting's outset that we've just honored 10 staff members across the system for their enormous contributions to our work. None of this happens, Roy, without the staff. We know that. And so on this note, I want to mention UBalt for a moment, which just won gold for its new website in the UCDA Design Awards. From 800 entities, fewer than 20 earned its highest honor. UBalt was recognized also for its body of creative work, celebrating the university, its people, on this, its centennial anniversary as well. It happens because of staff. And so to our staff across the system, I thank you for doing the work, telling the story. Kurt, I appreciate your telling your team specifically that we call them out. So let me close with these final comments. You've been very tolerant of me and saluting all that we do. I'm going to tell our story on Monday with help from a number of our presidents, particularly from President Bro and our student council leader, Mr. Vasquez Reyes. I'm going to tell our story at their invitation to the Maryland House Appropriations Committee. The speaker requested this. They want to know, you know, we have all this glorious work to celebrate, to talk about, and meanwhile we're getting hammered. They want to know about the impact of federal actions on our operations and on our budget. When I do that, I'm going to make the case that when it comes to Maryland's fiscal challenges, which in turn impact us, we're not part of the problem. We're part of the solution, a big part of the solution. That's what you heard here today as I brag on what all our wonderful people do. College degrees clearly correlate with economic strength. By the way, we awarded a record number of degrees last year, a record number, more than 45,000. We are maybe probably the primary supplier of talent to Maryland's highest need industries. We've got a $1.6 billion R&D enterprise, which doesn't only, as important as it is, safeguard our health and our security and our sustainability. What we do grows our GDP. With the right tools, with the right support, we are Maryland's bait, luring companies that want proximity to our people, to our ideas, to our innovations, our partnership. Our system makes Maryland. And I want to thank everybody involved for proving that every single day. Madam Chair, I've talked more than enough. This concludes my report.
Well, thank you, Chancellor. Do we have any questions for the Chancellor on his report? Seeing none, Chancellor, thank you again, and we'll now turn to the report from the Council of University System Faculty, Dr. King-White. And welcome to your first meeting with the Board of Regents.
Thank you. And thank you to the Board of Regents, Chancellor Perman, and the Salisbury community, really. The dinner was great last night, but every time I come to this campus, it's just very impressive. So thanks again. I am fortunate enough to be on a campus where there are numerous former chairs of CUSIF, and I've relied on them to guide me. They have all said that I should introduce myself a little bit. So if this is a hazing thing, I apologize. But I'll give you a couple sentences about myself as academic, as a dad, and then as a citizen of the state. My name is Ryan King-White. I'm a professor of sport management at Towson University. I've been there for 20 years. Prior to that, I was a student at the University of Maryland College Park in their master's and PhD program. My research considers the powerful role sport and physical activity plays in our lives from a sociological perspective. My colleague, Dr. Jessica Minkove, myself, and others, including Dr. Ellen Starosky, who's a major Title IX scholar, just published a book on innovative pedagogical practices in sport management. And I have another co-authored with a former student who is a professor at Fairleigh Dickinson and his graduate school classmate that critically evaluates competitive junior golf, as well as my role in it, in that community, due to arrive sometime in the middle of 2026. My wife, Megan, and our three kids, Colin, 14, Meredith, 12, and Evelyn, 10, live in Towson, actually pretty close to Target, if you know the layout of that institution. And most weekends you'll find us following them compete on the golf course, in the swimming pool, or soccer field. And usually it's in more than 2 different places. If we get 2, we're lucky. That's me as dad, me as academic, me as citizen. I chose to serve on CUSIF because my children are nearing high school and college age. By the time I'm done, our son will be a junior in high school. And I want to do my part in helping to support higher education from a faculty perspective, as my children and or their friends are very well going to choose coming to USM schools from a variety of campuses. So that is me as citizen, which leads me to being in front of you all here. This month, the CUSIF held our first meeting after a summer where I worked closely and Maida in XCOM, worked closely with the USM to reorganize the software platform for online meetings and gather the most up-to-date roster we could. As of yesterday, I think we have our full council roster for the start of the academic year. So that took a lot of work, working with the USM office as well. Kelsey Beckett did a great job in supporting. At our general body meeting, which was held on September 10th, I met with our new faculty members, taught them a little bit about what we could and couldn't do on CUSIF. And we did brief introductions. And then brought in Nancy O'Neill, Executive Director of the Kerwin Center of Academic Innovation, to speak about digital accessibility and Title II requirements. These are to help learners who have challenges. And she fielded questions on this. What is important to me, again, as dad, as citizen and scholar, is our son's superpower is mixed dyslexia. So making sure that learners from that have challenges have support is personally important. So in my first meeting as chair, I realized some of these things coming together. After that, Vice Chancellor Ellison Wren shared system-wide concerns with USM from the USM perspective, primarily revolving around issues with international students obtaining visas as they attempt to complete their studies, ongoing concerns about funding from the federal and state level, and Kelsey Beckett did detail how she had organized the Zoom software for meetings this year. It seemed to work well. Obviously, we're still working out some things. We didn't, again, have our full roster until yesterday. So I was reticent to demand that we have chairs to our subcommittees, although some people did step forward. I wanted everyone to have a chance. So by next month, I hope that I'll be able to report that this chair sent me this stuff. We did get someone to agree to be on the awards committee, which is Dr. Lorenda Naylor. I did leave doctor off in the written report. I did not do that intentionally. I just wanted to note that. We will fill that out with the roster per the bylaws, hopefully by the next meeting. We had Dr. Mary Crowley from the University of Maryland Global Campus step forward to be on EdPol. And for AY 25-26, she's going to continue focusing on AI faculty training and seek further recommendations, or to provide further recommendations on a bullying policy proposal they've been putting together. Faculty Affairs does not have an official chair yet, but generally want to work on issues like effectively sharing and disseminating information on digital accessibility as it pertains to Title II that we had the presentation on, as well as working with XCOM as it pertains to the state of shared governance and academic freedom, which I think we're seeing come up more and more. Legislative Affairs, Dr. Holly Brewer is going to chair. They are going to work on trying to advocate for faculty members to serve on the board, collective bargaining, and developing responses, most focused on developing responses to federal and state legislation coming through. The Research Committee is trying to, which is chaired by Dr. Tom Abrams, who will retire in December, and Miroslav Janowski from the University of Maryland, Baltimore, are going to try to work on finding strategic ways where different campuses' strengths can come together for advancements in research over the coming year. They've been encouraged to work closely with the USM Vice Chancellor of Research on that. Finally, our Rules and Membership Committee does not have an official chair. Longtime CUSIF member Dr. Nagaraj Nirchal reports that there was a spike of interest in that committee this year. I think we've kind of come to the conclusion that online meetings are going to be the way. And we don't necessarily have standard operating procedure for a variety of things. I gave just one example in the report. Just getting something as simple as quorum effectively and efficiently is something they are going to work on. That was not like their crowning thing that they want to work on, but it is one example. With that said, that is a report from the Council of University System faculty. I look forward to updating you throughout the rest of this year, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for your initial report. And are there any questions for Dr. King-White? Seeing none, we will see you at the next meeting.
Thank you.
And we'll now turn it over to the Council of University System staff led by Mr. Prouty.
Good morning, Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, Regents and Presidents, and thank you for the time and space to deliver these remarks or this report today. I was thrilled to hear about today's recognition of the Board of Regents staff awardees for exempt and non-exempt categories at the top of the meeting. I'd like to thank the board sincerely for their work in identifying these spectacular staff members across the system, and I look forward to the next cycle of nominations and selections. By means of introduction, my name is Roy Prouty, and I work at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, as a member of the exempt staff. I work in the Division of Information Technology as the Assistant Director for Research Computing, where I endeavor to reduce the time to research for researchers, but faculty, graduate students, using our cyber infrastructure, be this our campus computing cluster, virtual or physical computers, or cloud-based solutions. If you ever want a long conversation about managing computational workloads among heterogeneous hardware, I'm your guy. I digress. In this role, I work closely with faculty, other staff, and students to ensure time within our infrastructure is well spent and moving projects forward across all the colleges at UMBC and beyond. Said differently, I keep a bunch of computers on, and I help people learn how to use them. The Division of Information Technology at UMBC, along with many other units on that campus, strongly supports shared governance. Our CIO proudly reminds us that he served on the parking committee sometime in the 1700s, and is therefore partly responsible for finding a few parking spaces, which is a hot commodity on many of our campuses. In fact, I began my role in staff shared governance 4 years ago after a supervisor suggested I run for a campus seat. Since then, my role has evolved, and it's in this capacity that I'm joining you today as the chair of the Council of University System Staff, taking over for Dr. Kalia Patricio, who I know worked with you all over the last few years to support staff across the system. For my first report to the Board of Regents in this role, I wanted to briefly address my role here. In brief, I report out at meetings like this one, and I work with system leadership to raise up ideas from my colleagues across the system, nearly 13,000 non-exempt and exempt staff who are not affiliated with any collective bargaining unit. Between these meetings, I'll work with my leadership team to identify important ideas, start these conversations, and explore solutions. Speaking of my leadership team, on CUS, I am joined this year by 5 wonderful staff members who come from 5 wonderful campuses working in residential life, information technology, academic and student affairs, student conduct, and human relations. These are Meredith Carpenter as vice chair from College Park, Kevin Bruce as secretary from UMCS, as well as 2 members at large, Trish Johnson from Bowie State University and Kelly Cowger from Salisbury University. A complete roster of all system staff who are taking on additional responsibilities and dedicating their time to system shared governance on CUS is attached to the meeting materials and is publicly available on the system website. I hope I speak for all listed in saying that I'm happy to be serving the system, or that we're happy to be serving the system in this capacity alongside students, faculty, and other campus and system senior leaders. Last year, now I'm getting to the report. Last year, CUS Chair Dr. Kalia Patricio Dr. Kalia Patricio worked with other CUS leaders and myself to pen a letter to the Office of the Governor of Maryland. While a copy of this letter is attached to the meeting materials, I'll summarize the contents by saying that this letter was focused on building a better relationship between the state government and the system staff that compose nearly 13,000 voting citizens in the state. Dr. Patricio and I met with the outgoing Secretary of Budget and Management, Helene Grady, along with key education policy advisors in the Moore administration this past Wednesday to discuss better modes of advocacy for non-bargain system staff. We're excited to have made this connection, and I'll continue to work to keep the system informed of any developments this may bring. This year, while only having conducted 2 meetings as far as CUS is concerned, the following ideas are clear as the executive board or the leadership team and I read reports and hear reports at these meetings from staff among our campuses. Number 1, staff feel appreciated by the words and deeds of campus leadership. Staff are excited and energized by the various campus celebrations, be they homecoming plans or centennial celebrations. Staff also feel uninformed and sometimes surprised by decisions made by university administrators. Decisions around salary changes, retirement plan changes, and what programs can be subsidized by tuition remission are all examples of changes that have surprised staff in the last few weeks and months. While changes to state appropriations, federal support, and perhaps enrollment, but I know that that's not right anymore. Thank you, Chancellor. As all of these changes are dealt with on our campuses, staff who understand the financial and administrative burdens these changes place on our campuses also understand the need for difficult and sometimes speedy decision-making. This understanding buys goodwill, community, and positive morale, among staff, leading to retention, productivity, and a university worth working at, excuse me. Far and away, it is clear that we can do better to communicate changes made or pending to our campus community, especially staff. Finding that perfect mode of effective and efficient communication is always hard, and we have already engaged with a few campus presidents and administrators as thought partners to create better avenues for communication through shared governance and beyond. As we move into the next few years with what we've all agreed to be financial uncertainty, I know I speak for the entire Council of University System staff in saying that I hope that we can work together to think of new and enhanced ways to communicate and provide background for the undoubtedly difficult decisions that'll be coming down the pipe. In closing, I know my proclaiming that information flow is complicated is not a new idea, and I'm not thrilled to be bringing up this issue while not at the same time providing a potential solution. But it's clear to me that communication among staff is a growing issue that needs to be addressed. I hope that I can continue to work with CUS leadership, other shared governance leaders, and leaders throughout the system to brainstorm and propose creative paths forward. Our next meeting is October 14th. It's a Tuesday. They all are. So I look forward to bringing another report to you at the end of next month. Thank you again for the time to share this report with you, and I'm looking forward to another year of collaboration and innovation.
Thank you. And are there any questions for Mr. Prouty? Seeing none, thank you for your report. And now we'll turn it over to the Council of University System Presidents, President Bro.
Thank you and good morning.
Morning.
Thank you and good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to see you all here. I'm so pleased to be before you to represent the Council of University System Presidents. I am Amin Tabro, the very proud 10th president at Bowie State University, and I'm privileged and honored and humbled to be able to serve in this capacity. Good morning to Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, Board of Regents, colleagues, and everyone joining us here today. And on behalf of CUS, let me extend special greetings and welcome to our new regents and shared governance leaders. We invite you all to visit our campuses. We look forward to seeing you and working with you throughout the year. I have to say something to President LaPree and the Salisbury University campus community for your wonderful, wonderful hospitality. The great food, including the great crabs last night, is nothing like having Maryland blue crabs at dinner. So thank you so very much for the warm hospitality. And I think we can all agree that nothing builds collegiality quite like a lively conversation over the technique for crab opening and crab cracking. And, you know, we deal with a lot of serious matters in higher education, and it keeps us very, very busy. So last night was quite special. And I also had a chance to exhibit skills that no one else but this group knows about. And so I thank you, Chair Gooden, for your comments earlier. You know, the biggest challenge we had last night was whether Old Bay seasoning should be in its own food group. And so we thank you for that. Moving on to the report at hand. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to serve as the chair for CUS. Since the last Board of Regents meeting in June, CUS met twice, on August 4th and also on September 8th. We met in person at the Caldwell Center in Baltimore, and on August 4th, the presidents received a financial update from Senior Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance, Ellen Herbst. Chancellor Perman then facilitated a discussion on anticipated student activism, an annual topic on the CUSP agenda as the fall semester was opening. Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs, Wren, led a discussion on Title VI, along with Catherine Bainbridge, Assistant Attorney General. CUSP concluded with the agenda items on audits and the Board of Regents dinners on campus, which we had a great example of last night. Before the CUS meeting on that date, we met with the Chancellor's Council, where we welcomed the new shared governance chairs of CUSIF, CUS, and USMSC. The body also received a research update from Vice Chancellor for Research and Economic Development from Michelle Machucci. And then CUS met in person again on September 8th. At this meeting, the council heard from the University of Maryland College Park Chief of Police, David Mitchell, who who provided an outstanding update for safety and security. And you heard earlier today about the continued need for us to address safety and security. We truly thank Chief Mitchell and College Park President Darrell Pines for having him come out to address us. The presidents also received another budget update from Senior Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance, Ellen Herbst. And the meeting concluded with Vice Chancellor for Legislative Affairs, Susan Lawrence, discussing a briefing of the House Appropriations Committee you heard about earlier that's scheduled for Monday. This concludes my report at this time, and I'm open for any questions or any comments.
Any questions for Dr. Bro? Seeing none, thank you for your report.
Thank you.
We'll now have the University System of Maryland Student Council President, Mr. Vasquez Reyes.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning, Chair Gooden, Regents, Chancellor Perman, and all those assembled. My name is Jefferson Vasquez Reyes, and I have the absolute pleasure of serving as the president of the University System of Maryland Student Council for the 2025 and 2026 term. I'm currently a student at the University of Maryland College Park, go Terps, and majoring in psychology and on the pre-med track. And I'm excited to represent more than 170,000 students and strengthen our connection this year through shared governance. The USM Student Council started off strong by debuting the inaugural, now annual USMSC launch event at Towson University on September 9th. Once again, we're very grateful for President Mark Ginsburg and his team's hospitality and attendance. Thank you. More than 50 student leaders from across the USM attended the event and participated in a robust program that included a special Q&A and discussion with Chancellor Perman and Chair Gooden. Let me just say that the student leaders that attended this event left energized and with a renewed focus. Many reached out later, expressing interest in supporting the USM office and our council. This year, we have an incredible executive board and board of directors team joining us. Bear with me because there's about 12 if you include also the student regents. So for our executive board, the Vice President of Undergraduate Affairs is Princess Niamali from the Universities of Shady Grove. Harshal Chauhan, representing the graduate students from UMBC. Co-directors of Government Relations are Cameron Askew, Jaden Ferris, both from UMBC. Co-directors of Student Affairs, Shrimahi Gorakavi, Mahi Kunbar, both from the University of Maryland College Park. Our co-directors of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Kevin Lopez Cruz from Bowie State and Sarah Ochwe from the University of Maryland College Park. And our lone director of Communications and Marketing, Eric Amaya from the University of Maryland College Park. And I would like to say one of the initiatives I have this year is to ensure that there is diversity amongst our board. So hopefully we'll have more of our institutions joining us in our board of directors and our executive board as we move forward. As a council, we have agreed to emphasize and bring the student voice to this meeting. We are navigating polarizing times, but we want to support your efforts and the incredible work you are doing. Our government relations team has prioritized the USM's budget as their priority for advocacy, while our student affairs directors are interested in creating advocacy/leadership training for our students. And our DEI directors are looking to facilitate meaningful discussions system-wide with students. We look forward to bringing the voices of many to your table, those who work full-time and attend school part-time, those who maintain a family at home, those who are living here abroad pursuing an education as international students, and more. Because it is important that these voices and perspectives are heard here so well-calculated decisions can be made. Regents, presidents, system office staff, please know that the work you do is valued and very important. On behalf of our council, we thank you for your hard work and efforts that create opportunities for our students. I look forward to sharing more with you as our work gets underway in earnest over the next several weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your report. The next order of business is consent agenda. Decisions regarding which items to include on the consent agenda were made by me and the committee chairs. However, any regent may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda for separate review and discussion. Before I move approval of the consent agenda, I ask if there are any items that any regent would like removed from the consent agenda for separate review and discussion. Bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one little personal note on the minutes for the full board meeting on June 13th.
Mm-hmm.
I was there, but could you add my name as being present
Yes.
for both the open and closed session?
We can do that.
Thank you very much. And the other one is on item 2G, the minutes for the Research and Education Economic Development Committee minutes from May 6th. Could we remove those from the consent agenda and reschedule those for the October meeting of that committee?
Yes, we
Thank
can
you.
make those changes. And with those changes, can I get a second, Bill?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the committee reports. We have 3 items for the committee of the whole. First, we'll hear an item on the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science Voluntary Separation Incentive Program. Regent Fish, the floor is yours.
Good morning.
Morning.
So the Finance Committee actually has 2 items for full board vote. The first is UMCES is requesting approval to implement a voluntary separation program. And the program would apply to employees whose salaries are supported by at least 35% state funding. Participants would receive contributions to their supplemental retirement accounts, and that would be equal to 50% of their salary, plus $500 for each year of service with the USM. These payments would be paid over 2 years, fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27, with a cap of $50,000 per year. There are requirements, I won't go into the details, but there are also requirements for length of employment as well. If fully subscribed, UMCES estimates the cost at $750,000 in fiscal year 26 and 27, and it would generate about $1.2 million in salary savings in fiscal year 27. Would also lower the institution's salary base by roughly 1%. However, that does not include any potential state-approved COLAs or merit increases. We did receive additional information where the committee asked how this fits into UMCE's overall plan to handle state budget cuts as well as reduction in research funding. And that was and is included in your materials as well. And with that, I will pause and ask if there are any questions. Seeing none, I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Our next item is related to the Institute of Bioscience and Biotechnology, IBBR. They seek to establish a new center for biomeasurement and biomanufacturing innovation. Regent Fish?
Sure. So College Park is requesting approval to renovate underutilized portions of several buildings. And this is, as Chair Gooden said, for the Institute of Bioscience and Biotechnology Research. It's in Rockville. It's adjacent to the universities at Shady Grove. The project will establish the new Center for Biomeasurement and Biomanufacturing Innovation. It is a joint initiative with NIST. The project budget is $10 million. This includes $4 million in secured federal funds from NIST, $4 million in Empower funds, and $2 million in institutional funds. It is through this partnership with NIST that we will create a state-of-the-art office and research space and launch a world-leading research dedicated to accelerating biomanufacturing innovation. This work is further supported by multi-year programmatic funding from NIST and in the amount of approximately $29 million. Any contracts as a result of this project will require BPW approval. And the additional information that we wanted to see on this particular project, was consideration, given the location to Shady Grove and given the status of some buildings having extra space, whether or not this could be consolidated into that space. And it was determined based on the funding from NIST and the specificity of that funding, as well as the needs for the space, the type of space, that that consolidation would not make sense. So with that, I will open it up and ask if there are any questions. All right, seeing none, I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second? Any further discussion? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Chair, the motion carries.
Thank you, Regent Fish. Our last item on today's open agenda is for information. The board will hear an update on the Civic Education Data Strategy Work Group. As you'll recall, this work group was formed in response to the board's April 2025 charge to develop a research-informed, actionable plan to assess what USM students know about civics. A work group was established that included regents, shared governance bodies, system office staff, and campus representatives. The work group produced a comprehensive report that details their proposed strategic implementation plan. The report is available in your materials. On behalf of the board, I want to thank the work group for their work. I also want to thank our regents who proposed this charge back in April. Now more than ever, this is important work, and you've helped tremendously in moving us closer toward our strategic goals. Dr. Allison Wren, Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs, will introduce the report. Dr. Wren, please begin.
Thank you, Chair Gooden. Good morning. Today I'm presenting the Civic Education Data Strategy developed at the charge of the board. This strategy is designed to give us a clear, system-wide framework to assess what our students know about civics, how they apply that knowledge, and the values that shape their participation. It aligns directly with USM's Vision 2030 and our commitment to ensuring every graduate leaves prepared for engaged citizenship and workforce readiness. To begin, let's look at the history of the USM Board of Regents' commitment to civic education over time. This work began with the 2018 Civic Education Task Force, which laid the foundation by articulating the importance of preparing students not only for career readiness, but also for active democratic participation and community engagement. Since that initial task force, the Regents have consistently built upon this vision, guiding campuses through successive phases of planning, assessment, and implementation. Building on that foundation, in 2021, the Chancellor advanced the work by aligning campus efforts with nationally recognized frameworks by signing the Multi-State Collaborative. In 2022, the Board of Regents embedded civic learning in the system strategic plan, Vision 2030. The plan commits to ensure all graduates are civically literate and prepared for democratic participation. It embeds civic education into general education curricula, expands service learning, and introduces micro-credentials to recognize civic competencies. Vision 2030 calls for institutions to pursue the Carnegie Community Engagement Classification. We are proud to report that as a result of this charge and the work of our institutions, 8 of our institutions applied for the classification this past year, and we will learn the results of those applications this winter. Since that time, the work has continued with the Civic Education Summit, new grants to advance democratic engagement, and the development of the Civic Education Community Engagement Council. As a result, we have convened experts, faculty leaders, and stakeholders from across institutions to share best practices, supported the classification application process, and brought new resources and supports to our institutions. As a result of the board's investment in civic education, our institutions have been working to integrate all of this work into our campuses. The development of a civic education data strategy builds on the Regents' ongoing commitment to civic readiness. At the same time, national and state data remind us why this work matters. Nationally, civic knowledge remains low, and employers consistently identify gaps in the very skills civic learning develops: critical thinking, communication, and ethical reasoning. Furthermore, strategies to assess civic knowledge and civic engagement remain disjointed and issue-specific, failing to provide the information to inform a larger, more integrated landscape of learning and opportunity. This is why the USM Regents acknowledge the importance of a systemic approach. Our Vision 2030 plan calls for our Civic Education and Community Engagement Council to strengthen civic learning across our institutions and build campus-level implementation plans, and to build civic data structures. The plan created by the work group provides a coordinated, system-wide approach to civic education that aligns with the Regents' vision and our broader state priorities. The work group used a systematic approach to attack this work. In phase one, there was framing and goal setting. We convened the work group with broad representation, including shared governance bodies and campus-level experts from across the system. We also brought in a variety of esteemed speakers and experts at both the state and national level to ground our work in best practices and research. During this phase, we set our goals, adopted common terminology, and identified the frameworks that would guide the strategy. In phase two, we worked on strategy design. We conducted an initial scan of current civic activity and data practices, scoped campus and system budget implications, identified training and resource needs, and drafted the preliminary data strategy. Phase three was input and finalization. We circulated the draft to targeted stakeholders for feedback, incorporated that input, finalized the strategy, and prepared the full written report summarizing process, findings, and recommendations. Phase four, report sharing. We formally submitted the completed report and stand before you today to present the findings. Following this meeting, we will also share the report with our Vice Presidents of Student Affairs, our provosts, the Maryland Higher Education Commission, and national stakeholders. And as a reminder, this was all done in 90 days. When we built the strategy, we started by making sure it stood on strong foundation. We grounded it in national best practices, drawing on frameworks like civic learning democratic engagement, or CLDE, and knowledge, skills, and dispositions, KSD, on accreditation standards, on the Carnegie classification, so that what we create is credible, rigorous, and consistent with how leading systems are approaching civic learning across the country. We also made sure to listen closely to what the workforce is asking for. National employer surveys keep coming back with the same themes: communication, collaboration, ethical reasoning, critical thinking. These are skills that are too often underdeveloped, and our approach ensures civic learning builds those competencies right alongside democratic engagement. Again, this work connects directly to our strategic plan. Civics education was made a system priority in that plan, and this strategy is our roadmap to turning that vision into measurable outcomes across all 12 institutions. And finally, we were careful not to get ahead of the state. By pacing our work with MHEC's 26 to 2030 state plan, we protect against wasted effort or misalignment and set ourselves up for long-term coherence, sustainability, and statewide alignment. A lot of words on here, but this is also in the board packet. The work group selected two guiding frameworks, the civic learning and democracy engagement framework and the knowledge, skills, and dispositions framework, which I'll share on the next slide. The CLDE model is a nationally recognized framework developed through a coalition that includes AAC&U, and other organizations to which we belong to, like the American Democracy Project. The CLD offers a research-based way to structure civic learning across our institutions. It articulates four interrelated dimensions: civic ethos, civic literacy, civic inquiry, and civic action, as a developmental pathway for students and a practical map for assessment and improvement. We are using CLDE as our organizing spine to align course-embedded measures, co-curricular activities, and institutional climate work. The CLDE model is a strong fit for the USM because it is flexible, adaptive, and inclusive enough to respect institutional autonomy while advancing a shared system vision aligned to accreditation expectations and our strategic plan. It is also a framework that is commonly used as a foundational framework in civic learning assessment tools. And by using this, we ensure alignment between practice and assessment at both the institutional and national level. Complementing the CLDE, the knowledge, skills, and disposition model allows us to organize civic learning evidence into 3 independent domains. Knowledge, what students understand about civic systems and contexts. Skills, how they apply that knowledge through communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and problem solving. And dispositions, the values and commitments that motivate civic responsibility. Pairing KSD with CLDE gives us a holistic measurement approach and answers the workforce readiness imperative. National employer surveys, again, repeatedly are looking for certain competencies that sit squarely in the skills and dispositions domains. Furthermore, the workforce frequently employs the KSD framework to assess our employer competencies, allowing us to align our strategy and our assessment tools to workplace expectations. Great. As we designed this strategy, we explicitly accounted for the complex, interrelated governance ecosystem that shapes higher education and civic education in Maryland. First, we recognize the role of state law and authority. Changes to general education, for example, require the rest with the Maryland General Assembly, and any legal interpretation belongs to the Maryland Office of the Attorney General, not the work group. Accordingly, we stayed within our charge and did not propose curricular mandates or conduct any legal analysis. Second, we aligned the cadence of our work with MHEC's 2030 state plan and its oversight role. Advancing ahead of that plan, again, could risk misalignment, and we would have to go through rework and resource strain. Pacing with MHEC ensures coherence and long-term sustainability. Third, we grounded the strategy in USM policy and priorities, including Vision 2030, and these commitments and structures guide implementation while preserving institutional autonomy. Fourth, we honored shared governance expectations. Representatives of CUSIF, CUS, USMSC, and CUSP partnered in the work, reflecting USM's collaborative decision-making culture and ensuring the strategy is academically credible and institutionally legitimate. Fifth, we attended to campus-level policies and climates, from decentralized assessment cycles to varied data infrastructures and local mission differences, which is why the plan is non-prescriptive, flexible, and designed for comparability without uniformity. And finally, we ensured alignments with national accreditors and Carnegie classification requirements. Middle States accreditations requires institutions to demonstrate clear assessment of general education and student learning outcomes. The Regents asked us to deliver actionable recommendations in just 90 days. Importantly, our scope was clear. This is a data strategy, not a curricular mandate. We did not create new courses, collect individual student data, or issue legal analyses. Instead, we focused on defining shared language, and identifying national frameworks, and proposing a phased implementation plan that respects institutional autonomy while advancing a shared system-wide vision. We carefully considered the diversity and complexity of our institutions, the work that is already happening at the direction of the Regents, alignment with the MHEC state plan, our campus level and system level infrastructure and resources, and fiscal constraints. The work of the plan itself is deliberately aligned with the timeline for MHEC's 2030 state plan, ensuring we move in step with statewide priorities rather than getting ahead of them. It is also structured to ensure full campus, participation. Every institution, regardless of its size or mission, will engage in the process, conducting inventories, piloting assessments, and contributing to system-wide reporting. Importantly, the plan takes into account campus-level resources and capacity. We know that each institution operates in its own context with different infrastructures and staffing models. That's why the approach is flexible and non-prescriptive, allowing institutions to customize within a shared framework. Finally, this phase structure supports the strategic development of sustainable infrastructures. By moving from inventories to pilot assessments to long-term reporting and policy recommendations, we are building a system that is both scalable and lasting, positioning USM to lead nationally in civic education assessment. I'll quickly discuss each year. Year one is about institutional inventory and capacity building, and you can see on the screen how we will work through that. We will also create a shared repository and begin preparing for system-level reporting. And I can come back to any of these slides during the question period as needed. In year two, USM institutions will move from planning to implementation based on the findings from year one. We will create a standardized USM-wide reporting template to support benchmarking, equity monitoring, and shared learning across the system. In year three, we will focus on synthesis and strategy. We will aggregate findings across institutions, identify promising practices, and prepare a comprehensive system-wide report. We'll host a symposium, develop toolkits, and finalize sustainability and policy recommendations. While it is often the desire to move to policy recommendations quickly, strong, effective, and resilient policies are those that are built on strong foundations and solid data. I have 3 more slides, and I'll move through a couple of them quickly before I get to the last one. I just wanted to take a moment to thank the incredible team of people who worked throughout the summer to develop this report. Again, we had a wide-ranging group of folks, our own nationally recognized faculty experts, and a special thank you to Dr. Amin Tabro, who offered a thoughtful and in-depth review of the final report. And also, we'd like to thank Chancellor Perman, Chair Gooden, and the Board of Regents for your ongoing support. Before I get to a final next steps, I want to talk briefly about some recent things that have been out in the media about civics and the national as well as the Maryland state perspective. At the national level, the Department of Education has recently launched the America 250 Civics Education Coalition, which brings together partners including Heritage Foundation, Moms for Liberty, Hillsdale College, and Turning Point USA. These groups will focus on emphasizing patriotic education and civics as part of the commemoration. In addition, earlier this year, the Department of Education issued a new grant opportunity specifically focused on American history and civics that directly commemorate the 250th anniversary. The awardees will be announced late September. Please note that USM institutions have been engaging our local partners in teacher development for our American history, civics, and social studies teachers in this work. Here in Maryland, we have our own strong commitment to celebrate the birth of our nation through the Maryland 250 Commission, created by Governor Westmore's executive order. The commission has been charged with leading an inclusive statewide observance grounded in 3 themes: history, civics, and service. Maryland is proud to focus in celebrating our broad, inclusive, and diverse history. So what comes next? So if you look at this graphic, you'll see that the work group has just completed the initial planning phase. Before we can move to full 3-year implementation, there are critical foundation building and preparation phases we must move through first. The yellow stars highlight the early decision points where the board's guidance will be essential. The process is not linear, it's iterative. The decision points we anticipate today may look very different 6 months from now. The fiscal and policy landscape for higher education is shifting rapidly. Campuses are managing shrinking budgets, difficult staffing decisions, resource constraints, and increasingly complex student needs. Because of these realities, the Regents will need to revisit this implementation plan at several key points to assess both feasibility and relevance. Looking ahead this academic year, we will focus on laying the foundation. The Civic Education and Community Engagement Council will advance Vision 2030 by expanding civic learning opportunities in both curricular and co-curricular spaces. In addition, the council will develop a campus-level civic education and community engagement implementation plan template and campus development strategy. Throughout this year, we will work collaboratively with MHEC as they develop the state plan for higher education. And upon release of the final state plan, we will align our system-wide campus implementation template to both the plan and the broader data strategy related to civic education. In the preparation year, our campus teams will use the template to prepare campus-level civic education and community engagement implementation plans. We can then begin the process of aligning our data strategy to these existing plans. As we look forward, it's important to emphasize the fiscal dimension of the proposed plan, which, as you read, which will cost between $700,000 and $1 million. The first decision point for this board will occur during the upcoming budget planning process. The chancellor and the board will need to weigh the recommendations of this plan against the larger system-level fiscal strategy and determine a long-range fiscal plan to fund the full implementation and maintenance costs associated with this strategy. At the second decision point, the board will also need to use an iterative approach to suggest adjustments and revisions to the plan as appropriate. At all decision points, system-level leadership teams will need to evaluate both system and campus-level capacity to not only implement the strategy, but to maintain data systems over time. That review will provide an opportunity to reassess the original plan in light of new information and changing conditions. At this point, I will turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Wren. Questions for Dr. Wren? Tom?
Yes. First of all, I want to really say it was a busy 90 days putting this together. And I really want to thank Dr. Jennifer Lynch from the Systems Office, who spent an enormous amount of time on this. Jennifer, thank you. And to our former regents, Hugh Breslin and Louis Pope, who were catalysts for this, and our current regent, Bill Wood. This is a good first step. It's a strategy. We had to be mindful of costs. We had to be mindful of each institution's very individualistic approaches to this. But I think that it's a good step forward for those of us who'd like to see it faster, quicker. I guess we'll just have to work within the system to make strides. I don't think anybody in this room thinks that Americans are up to speed on their civic education requirements, but all in all, very good work. It's not monolithic, it's bespoke, it's flexible. And to everybody who was on the work group, I commend them for all their hard work. So thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Tom, for stepping up to do this. Drew, do you want to add any comments to this?
No, not this time. Thank you.
Okay, Bill?
I'd just like to also compliment Tom and thank Tom for the hard work that went into this whole project. To get it together in 90 days is pretty remarkable. And Tom's leadership went a long way in making that happen. Thank you, Tom.
I always tease the chancellor about academic time versus time. And they did this on business time. So this was,
we promised you 90 days.
Yeah.
Promise is a promise.
it is, and you made it. Any, Andy?
Thank you to everyone who worked on this. I just want to make sure I understand what this presentation was saying and what the plan is. Just to take a step back, if I remember correctly, the way this got started was there were a number of members of the board who wanted to make sure that students in the system learn civics. We didn't want to go too far and start to say, X, Y, and Z ought to be taught. We said, let's assess right now what our students know so we can figure out what needs to be done. If I'm reading this presentation correctly, we now have a plan for 3 or 4 years before we can assess what students know. I don't know where this is leading us. I thought we were getting a plan for how do we assess what students know right now. Do we get that after 3 years or do we get that sooner?
After we implement this plan, we should know what students know.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So after 3 years, we'll know what our students know.
After 3 years, yes, if we follow the
We
plan.
have tools and process in place to be able to tell you that at any point.
With great respect with everyone who worked on this, I'm not satisfied with that. I'll just leave that be for the second.
If I could say something, please.
Yes.
So I wrestled with, my question was, is there any way to speed up the timeline? So I'm right where Regents Merrick is.
Why does it take 3 years, you're asking? Again, it's imperative to build shared infrastructure and support our institutions who are very different. We do not have complete shared information systems across the system, so that makes things a little bit more challenging. We have to wait for what MHEC is going to do on civic learning so that we're in alignment with that. We also have to allow the board to consider the cost implications of this in the context of so many other competing priorities.
Can't we gather the data while we're waiting for MHEC? Can't we speed that process up?
I think we need to wait to do a self-assessment survey, a civic data scan, to see what we're already doing. So I think these things take time and cost money to start with. And so it's not that we want this to go slowly, but again, we have limited resources, and that includes money and people. And we have to decide as a system how we're going to expend those resources.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh,
My question, I guess, sort of piggybacks on that. In each year, you had the word implementation. So can you sort of give us a tick-tock of what implementation looks like? I mean, does that mean at year one, we're doing so much in this area, year two, we're doing so much in this area? It just seems kind of vague to me what implementation is, and maybe you can help me understand how it's implemented over the 3 years and exactly what that looks like.
Sure. So in year one, we will again begin to, let me get my notes up here because Jennifer did a little bit. Jennifer, do you want to come up here and maybe, is it okay if I ask Jennifer to give a little more detail? Jennifer was
expert on.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. We've developed a strategy where implementation is actually happening over the course of all 3 years. It's important to note, first of all, that every single one of our campuses and institutions has their own individual mission, their own individual data systems, their own ways in which civic learning is organized across their campuses. So part of that initial work is first understanding what is happening on our campuses. The first time that I came and met with you, I gave a list of some of the wonderful things that are happening. That doesn't even scratch the surface. So our first step is to have our campus teams start to organize and to do an assessment of what is actually happening. So that work, that assessment work that you're talking about, happens on day one. We start to talk to our campuses about getting a campus team together to do that analysis of what's happening on their campuses. With that knowledge, they can then do a gap analysis to say, what are we doing really well when we start to look at that CLDE model? And what do we want to think about implementing? What do we have great data in? And where do we need to start to think about supplementing our data sources? So then that will give information in year two about what kind of new information might they want to pilot, what might want to look at, where they want to sort of bring things together. We'll be having conversations throughout that process to integrate all of that knowledge. And then in year 3, that's when we can start to take a look at what is happening system-wide, what changes do we want to make, what opportunities do we have, what are our strengths, and where do we want to make some policy recommendations.
So Jennifer, if I understand what you just said, at the end of year 1, you'll have the assessment. You'll know where everyone is. At the end of year 2, you'll know what you want to do going forward so that we have the most robust program. And in year 3, you'll implement whatever the program what is. So Andy, in answer to your original question, year 1 is when you get the answer.
When you say you're going to be checking to see what's going on, does that mean you're going to do an assessment of what programs, what courses, what activities are happening?
Yes.
Okay, so that is an input measure, and I thought we were really clear months ago that inputs, activities are one thing, but what we were curious about is knowledge. And so that's a matter of assessment of what students know and are able to do. That's different than this campus has 10 activities happening.
May I?
Yeah.
So it's both. It is both input and output. So as we start to look, when we start to look at that model, when we know nationally, when we're talking about civic knowledge is more than constitutional assessment of how you do on a course. And it is really about how you are taking that knowledge, what are the skills and dispositions that you have to support that knowledge to actually go out and then act upon that knowledge and impact your community and be a civic agent within your community. And so the model that we're looking at is really a landscape model across all of those different components on those frameworks. And so some of them you will get very, very discrete data points because our institutions will have them. Many of them are already doing their own surveys, assessments, they're doing national assessments like NESE. Others will be more qualitative measures. What are students doing? What is coming out of focus groups? Some will be counts. How many offerings are we providing for our students? We can't require them to come, but we certainly want to make sure that we have ample opportunity for engagement. So it really is, if you want to think about it, a mixed method approach of we are gathering both quantitative and qualitative data to give you a broad landscape of what civic learning looks across our institutions.
May? I appreciate the urgency that you attach to the matter. Of course. In this time, of course. Having said that, I would offer 2 points. One, the process that has been stood up, in my mind, never mind the timeline, the process that has been stood up is the right way to deal with such a weighty problem, to assess and to try to come to some agreement as to how we should approach the matter. I have a different recollection, with all due respect, Regent Smirek, about what was on the table in April. No question. The important issue itself. But I think we were headed in a direction that you all know was one I was very concerned about. We were close to a motion on the table, if not a motion on the table, to direct that all of these institutions have a course in civic education. That's why this kind of a process is important. And I was very transparent about my concern about that kind of approach, because as a department chair, as a dean, as a university president, now as your chancellor, I strongly believe that what we teach and how we teach is the province of the faculty. That's why we have them. It's a principle that I'm not willing easily to yield. And the regents in their wisdom, I think, understood that. And that's why this process, that's point number one, in terms of our respective recollections. Number two, I worry that in this important dialogue, some may get the impression that we're starting from scratch, that we don't do anything in the academy in civic education. And I just want to underscore the fact that, in fact, we do. And if I may, I might pick on some presidents to comment on all of this as well, because they're the ones that have to haul the barges on this matter with their faculty. Dr. Pines, I heard something about a course on the Constitution, or at least reading on the Constitution, which is so terribly important these days.
Well, in honor, sorry, didn't know that was so loud. Thank you, Chancellor Berman. In honor of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, each year at the University of Maryland College Park, we do a first year book. Many institutions do something similar. This year happens to be the Constitution. In addition, because it is the Declaration of Independence, we established a moniker called We Are the Terps instead of We Are the People. And there are lots of activities about educating our student body about civic education. So it just happens to be in alignment with our first year book theme. But let me take to a different topic. So just to give context about trying to do this with shared governance. All of us are aware of artificial intelligence, and at College Park, we would love to have a requirement in our general education that every student gets artificial intelligence across the entire campus. I can't do that instantaneously. It has to go through shared governance, has to go through faculty policy, Senate, refined. So that's one reason why we don't have a requirement in general education for artificial intelligence. As important as the topic as it is, it has to come up from grassroots efforts, very similar to civic education.
Who else? Amita?
Yes, thank you, Chancellor. I want to underscore that there is a great deal of activity happening across our campuses. So, I would really hope that no one leaves here thinking that we're not addressing this week alone was Constitution Day. It is in the law that we address programs and raise awareness about the Constitution. And I don't need to poll my colleagues, but I know that we adhere to that requirement. That's a statute in the law that every year we address Constitution Day. Bowie State University also has a course to raise awareness about civics. And across our campuses throughout the year, we are, yes, it might be looked upon as inputs, but we're also required to measure learning outcomes. That's part of our accreditation. So there's a great deal happening where I think the challenge comes, and it's been said, but I think needs to be said again. The question or the issue that's being raised is, how do you measure learning? And we can measure learning in a course, we can measure learning across a wide variety of activities, but you're talking about a system-wide approach to say from the system, what is the knowledge that's being acquired? Our systems are not the same. And so that's where you have a challenge. I think this is an excellent step forward. Yes, I'm on the committee, I review this, but as a sitting president, what I know is that it's going to take more than a course to sustain what we're trying to achieve, and that's the learning for our students, and to be able to say to the public, this is the data that is going to demonstrate not just that we're going to say, oh, we're doing this or that, but how do we know? Because our public wants evidence. They don't want us to just say, oh, we're doing this or that. So I agree wholeheartedly with the goal. But to get there is more than a thought. We're talking about building an infrastructure, and what we've done here is to lay a foundation on which we can build. And to do this in this amount of time is quite remarkable. So I do, with all due respect, I appreciate the concerns for the timing, but recognize you're asking us to do something that has not been done in the past, and that is a system-wide infrastructure. And that's where we'll be able to produce the data. And so the data is where we're heading in order to answer your question, and also to sustain what we're doing. Not, a course would allow us to say, okay, we did that, check. But I bought into, in joining this group, that we're going to build something that's going to be sustainable. Thank you.
Any other presidents?
Dr. Herman, I appreciate the Regent Merrick's comment. And I know how difficult it is. I was thinking we have presented just recently a lot of inputs, what we're doing it. So how do you measure what someone is learning and how they're implementing this in practice? I've been looking at the way in which young people vote as a measure of their participation and learning. And what I've seen, and not only our campus has older students, as you know, but in other places, is that we have a lot of young people involved in volunteering in activities, working in the communities. But on one crucial measure, that is, do they vote? They do not. And that is, if you were just looking at that as a measure of civic learning or civic engagement, you would be quite concerned. On the other hand, if you were looking at how many young people participate in activities of benefiting to the community, you would be quite pleased. So I think, Regent, it's difficult to measure that outcome. It's more easy to find out the inputs of what we're doing on campus, but how our students internalize that and effectuate that in the community is much harder to determine.
Looks like President Ginsburg.
Yeah, 3 quick points. Thank you. A great discussion. First, I think the purpose of shared governance is very important to consider as part of this discussion. It's not just creating consensus, it's creating a shared vision. And I really believe that the shared governance process allows for that creation of shared vision about important topics, including this. Having said that, though, just a couple of examples in our campus, as President Bro said, Constitution Day just happened. We had hundreds of students at a program the other day where one of the leading scholars in the country on the Constitution came to our campus from another university to speak, as did an appellate court judge from Maryland, and spoke eloquently about the value and the importance of the Constitution and some of the principles that make the Constitution such a preeminent document for our nation. Just one example of how I think civic education takes place, both in the classroom, but also adjunct to the classroom and university events that take place. But I want to just, in my last point, call attention to an action that this board took just earlier today, and that's the creation of the Cardin Center for Civic Responsibility and Civil Discourse on our campus, led by former Senator Ben Cardin. We believe that this is an entity that will create opportunities for the study and the promulgation of civic responsibility, not just on our campus, but also both throughout the state, throughout the system, and throughout the state. And so I want to be mindful that the kinds of things we're doing are important, they're consequential, they're impactful, and they take place both in and out of the classroom. Thank you.
Yes, and what?
Yeah, I mean, I am listening to all the conversation here. My feeling is that people are aware of the civic responsibilities they have. I think the students which we see that, I mean, they're more knowledgeable about what's happening around us. But the problem is they're disenchanted. They feel the system is rigged. They don't want to participate. So I don't know whether you can, by giving them the education, you can change that. It's just the environment, the perception coming from all the way, it's totally considered to be rigged in some ways. So I just feel, yeah, it's good to give them the education, but until the environment changes, people will not be going out and voting. I mean, the voting pattern is going down, and we don't understand that education is not going to change that.
Anyone else have any comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Dr. Wren, for your report. You certainly generated a lot of discussion. And you indicated there will be another checkpoint coming up And I'm going to suggest that, Andy, maybe you join this work group so that you can get your input in live.
You asked for it.
And that way, we're sure that everyone's on the same page. And so you just got another volunteer into your work group.
Always good to have more volunteers.
Yeah.
Honor and pleasure to serve. Thank you.
On that note, we're going to convene to closed. I want to first thank Salisbury again. Congratulations on your 100th anniversary, and thanks to you and your team for a wonderful evening. The challenge is out. I think our next meeting is at UMGC, if I recall. And so the challenge is out on dinner. I mean, Hagerstown took us to a baseball game. It was great. Now we had a crab feast in a 100-year-old dining hall, you know? So I can't wait to see what UMGC comes up with.
Madam Chair, I told President Fowler, I pointed out to him that our meeting is on Halloween, so look out, everybody.
I have to do some housekeeping things that Denise sent over. First, the closed session will be in Academic Commons 401, which is right across the hall. Second, we're taking our annual class picture. And before we move to closed session, we're going to take that picture with the regents. And we need to meet in the hallway to be escorted to the stairwell that we're using. And we should move expeditiously, Denise says, so that we can keep the meeting moving. The Open Meetings Act permits public bodies to close their meetings to the public in circumstances outlined in 3-305 of the Act and to carry out administrative functions exempted by 3-103 of the Act. The Board of Regents will now vote to reconvene in closed session. The agenda for the public meeting today includes a written statement with a citation of the legal authority and reasons for closing the meeting, and a listing of the topics to be discussed. The statement has been provided to the regents and it's posted on the USM's website. May I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. The meeting is closed.